give you a notice with regard especially to the recording. This is to remind councillors that the public section of this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years as noted on page 4 of the agenda. To those members of the public here today, all care is taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is understood your consent is given for your image to be inadvertently broadcast. I also remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meeting that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. I think that's really important that you understand that with this new technology, so we're moving into a technological world and we have to be aware of it. Can I ask, first of all, that everybody makes phone off or make sure it's on silent, please. Health and safety. If there's an earthquake, of course, it's drop, cover and hold under the desks, or maybe that beam looks pretty safe to me. But if we have to exit, there's exits. They're clearly marked out that side. I think if you go out these doors, you might have quite a drop. So I wouldn't suggest going out via those ones. The toilet facilities are out the door and round to the right. Okay. We're having trouble with the air conditioning at the moment. We're trying to get it sorted out. So feel free to take off your jackets or I'm not sure what else. And ties to make sure that you're comfortable. Welcome today. We've got some visitors. They will be introduced with their speaking rights. I'd especially like to welcome actually Graham McKean. Graham is with the First Union representing our bus drivers, and it's there is some negotiations going on. So he did ask for speaking rights, and he understands the reasoning for not because of there's some negotiations going on. But Graham, welcome. We do like you showing interest in our proceedings. We're here to support our bus company, our bus drivers and our community. And if we can all work together and get to make sure we get great outcomes, that's exactly what we're here for. So well, thank you for your participation. So the apologies. Do we have any? The apologies I have to date are Councillor Stacey Rose and Deputy Mayor Tina Salisbury. Larry, you're an alternate.
Right, and she may take my place when she comes, but also Councillor Hughes is just for lateness. She's for lateness at the Orange Parade.
Do we have any further? Then would someone move?
So moved, Chairman.
So moved, seconded by, you're Mr Thomas, aren't you, rather than Councillor Thomas from Rotorua. Welcome, and welcome to our two mayors who are here. Mayor Turner and Mayor Webber. Really good to see you here, thank you. Let's move on. Public forum is our first item. We're just the ground rules on public forum. We're giving you 5 minutes to speak. There can only be questions of clarification, and we make sure our submitters who are speaking don't repeat old data. So it's new information that we're looking for. And so first up, Deb Turner, are you ready to present to us? Welcome, Deb. You're well known to this committee. You've been here before. So the floor is yours. There's a red button there. If you press it green. And
Yep. Before I actually start this meeting this morning, I'd like to just say I was talking to a lady on the bus this morning, and she missed her bus because it left 4 minutes early, and she didn't know about the timetable. So how poor is that? There was no notice on the bus. She only made it to work on time. It's not the only time. She's been an hour late for work a couple of weeks ago. It's disgusting. Needs fixing. Hey, my name is Debs and I live in Papamoa. I'm here because I care about the people, care about the bus drivers. Thank you so much for having the Gold Line come past at 9 a.m. It has taken a lot of stress off me and others. Save a lot of time getting the 36 and waste a lot of time waiting around. You wonder why I keep coming back. It's because once I start something, I don't stop until I see results. The bus service, to see the bus service in Papamoa that we deserve. You have fixed the other bus services. What about putting the 36 back on full time, like you did before, and have it do the Manatapu bus and have it do the Manatapu bus? You run the Pies Pa bus down the long way to the shops. You say people want a shorter run, so it does not make sense to me. Why would you run a bus down the long way and you can't do it for the 36? It takes so long and people are sick of getting 3 buses, including me, to get anywhere. I can, and I was out at Pies Pa last week and managed to get a ride home, which took 25 minutes. So why would I get the bus if I had the bus from Pies Pa to town to Papamoa, which takes over an hour? And then you have to wait in town as well you can have it up to a 20-minute wait. So even if you put the 36 on every hour in the daytime and the weekends, I thought in the last meeting you were going to fix the Papamoa bus service. Even the Te Puke bus service has a better bus service. They had a bus to Manatapu about 10 years ago, and they stopped it because there weren't enough people. So why would you start again? A lot of people think it's a waste of time having 2 buses running to Te Puke when there's hardly anyone on them. Don't know if you have heard, they're looking at stopping all the cars from going down the mount and have a shuttle service from Bay Park. There is not even a bus service from Papamoa East to the mount. It would save a lot of cars going. Would you take the car or would you take the bus? Would you take 2 or 3 buses to get anywhere, or would you take the car or would you take the bus? What would you do? Would you walk 20 minutes to a bus stop, or would you take the car or would you take the bus? What would you do if you had heavy bags to carry for about 20 minutes? Would you take the car or would you take the bus? If you were in pain, elderly and could not walk far, would you take the car or would you take the bus, or would you just stay home? Some of our bus drivers' attitude is very poor and on getting the bus. How about them learning some customer service before someone gets hurt? Would you take the car or bus? If you had 2 or 3 stops on the way home and you had to stop and you had to stop and risk paying another bus fare or waste time waiting around for another bus, or would you take the car or would you take the bus? If it took over an hour to get half hour to the hospital and 3 buses, would you take the car or would you take the bus? It's faster to bus to Rotorua which takes just over an hour, which doesn't make sense. It is so slow. What's being done about the drivers' customer service? Still having trouble with some of them. The other day, it's going to put the other bus drivers' lives at risk, or a passenger. A few weeks ago, a young teen hopped on the bus and the driver pulled him back and his mate threatened to smash the driver's face. It was so close, it was not funny. Or is it because the company gets paid $10,000 for each new driver? It's like the time I was abused on the bus by a drunk. The attitude was disgusting. He used every S word that you could think of. And it was amazing, the attitude towards the councillors. They were so sorry and everything. But it's a different story when there is a lot of stress and time wasted with our bus service. It is very poor attitude. Some come up and start talking to me on the bus while I'm on the bus. That's why I know so much. And still wonder why you did such a big change and would be happy to have the old service back. Someone said they should have just put it on trial. And some of the elderly are saying it's too far to walk to a bus stop. I was talking to a lady and she lives in Te Puke and she's trying to get a bus stop closer. And this 30-minute transfer time is a joke. Give it -100. It works. It's worse on the weekend. Quite often I have to pay another bus fare because I'm missing the connection. And a lot of people are not happy with it, finding it cheaper to pay cash. My final question to you is, how would you feel if this was your parents trying to get a bus, and would you sit down and do nothing, or would you fight for a better bus service, the bus service they deserve for? By working together, let's get the bus service telling it deserves, and Papamoa making it less stress-free, less time-consuming, and a happy place to be on, encouraging more people to get the bus. That's it. Yeah.
I think we are slowly getting there from a rocky start. But there's certainly still a lot of room for improvement, and we are working on it. Committee, is there any questions or clarification? There's been none. Thank you, Deb.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you.
We now have Mr. Max Lewis. We have 5 minutes, sir, on accessibility.
Chairman, as Max comes forward, as part of your welcome, could we also acknowledge in the minutes Raewyn Broomnell has travelled from Rotorua today also. She's sitting with Graham McKean and she would have been part of the first union presentation. So if we could just acknowledge Raewyn in the room, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, our the transit group's proposal is to have to provide the best possible public transport service for Tauranga citizens. At my online meeting on the 27th of August, I made a statement that the transport blueprint strategy was not fit for purpose, and I asked the council to respond to my assertion. I received a response, and the response was that the strategy conforms to the NZTL criteria. However, This council doesn't have a contract with NZTA. They have an obligation to the citizens of the city. And thousands of physically challenged citizens cannot use the Blueprint transport service for three major reasons. Citizens who need mobility assistance cannot get their mobility appliance onto the bus. Second, citizens who are afraid of falling will avoid using the bus because they are concerned about the steps from curbside bus access. And the third are citizens who cannot walk 400 metres from the bus stop. And you may recall that there is a submission both here and in Tauranga City Council about the number of citizens with shortness of breath on exertion. You might recall that I've been suffering from this myself. Fortunately, I'm getting better. But if we take the USA Heart Foundation's survey on the number of people in a community with shortness of breath on exertion, their figure is that up to 27% of the population could have shortness of breath on exertion. And if we apply that to Tauranga City Council or Tauranga City with a population of 140,000, that's over 30,000 citizens who cannot walk 400 metres to a bus stop. I also note that the Tauranga City Council's TPAPA indicative business case is based on the Transport Blueprint strategy, and our concerns are that if consideration isn't given to these people, then it would jeopardise the TPIBC strategy. I know at our meeting later we said that the total mobility scheme was available, but many physically challenged citizens may not qualify for the total mobility scheme, and also the scheme is not free. Each journey, even with all of the subsidies, is $7.50 per one way, and if we have financially challenged citizens with disabilities, they cannot afford to use the total mobility system. However, the transit group are proceeding with their strategy. We want to have an improved bus service. We have formally registered our company as the Transit Group Tauranga Limited, and we are presenting our transit connected autonomous vehicle modal shift strategy to the Bay of Plenty Transport System Plan Management in this building on the 16th of December. We're doing a presentation to the Bay of Plenty Transport System Plan Management team. Our goal is to get Bay of Plenty Council's support for funding the business case. A quote from our note is that from NZTA, they have said that they will approve 50% of our business case funding if BOPRC recognise the transit strategy as a priority activity to include in their transport plan program prior to seeking NLT funding co-investment. So we have a statement from NZTA that they will pay for 50% if this committee recognises our scheme. If required, we will be submitting for funding application in the Regional Council's long-term plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Are there any questions of clarification? Starting with Councillor Thurston.
Max, thank you for your presentation. As you know, I've had a lifetime experience in the disability sector, and I was delighted to be able to lead the charge in the LTP around getting free bus services for profoundly disabled people across the Bay of Plenty, and all colleagues were totally supportive, were totally unanimous with it, and it's a replication of what was rolled out by Waikato Regional Council, and it'll be based on the B-card photo ID and sign off from their general practitioner or the disability organisation with which they are registered. So that's good news. So help is on its way. So, but no, I commend all my colleagues for supporting that at the LTP hearing. So thank you.
Further speakers? There may be none. Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for your presentation. We move on to acceptance of late items. I've been notified of none. General business and tabled items. You're a very privileged person, Mrs. Gordon, that you've got a speaking slot within the agenda itself. That's where that one goes. There'll be no items of general business. Conflicts of interest. Are there any real or perceived conflicts of interest that anyone wants to declare? There'll be none. The order of the business will... sorry, we're going to do the previous minutes. The previous minutes on the 27th of October, that was mainly the TSP sign-off. Would someone like to move the true and correct? Councillor Nees moved, seconded Councillor Brunning. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Any matters arising that anybody wants to raise? Mayor Weber?
Yeah, I think I bring it to attention. We have had an email from the independent chair, Mr. Kimpton, to the two mayors and the chairs asking if all organisations are still committed to it. And at the two mayoral and chair level, we have said yes. However, I do note that in a paper that went to Tauranga City recently, they are running with several sets of numbers, one which does not reflect taking all of the TSP commitments through to the long-term plans. So I just, as a matter arising to that particular point.
Thank you for raising that. Yes, there is. I believe NZTA was asking for a re-look at the prioritisation, and that has been done, I think. But thank you for raising it. Any further questions, matters arising? There being none, we move on. So before we move to the presentation by Waikato Whakatane District Council, can I just say that this, I'm adamant that this meeting, like you, Mayor Weber, needs to be at the strategic level, and one of our key roles is actually to set the strategic direction that we want things to take, and it's not for us to get into the work, the day-to-day management, but to keep it that high level. And if we're not happy with something, and we had a presentation from two people in the public forum this morning who have got concerns still, and they're valid. We need to actually look at our strategy and make sure that it's fit for purpose, and work with staff then to improve its fit for purpose. I've been really pleased in the last couple of months at how staff have responded to issues within Roots raised by the communities, that they've actually been proactive, and we now have integrated ticketing, which gives us really good data and robust data to actually make good decision making. And I think that will come out in the presentations today. But when we can see exactly how many people tag on and tag off at each stop, people in the community will say, oh no, this route's not used at all by anybody. We've got too many buses. That good data is going to be absolutely invaluable to us going forward. So can I now call Martin Taylor from the Whakatane District Council to present to us. If you'd like to just introduce yourself your role and whatever. Thank you. Press the button to make it go green.
Green for go. Thank you.
That's the one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to share with you today. My name's Martin Taylor. I'm the Transportation/Roading Manager with Whakatane District Council. I just want to share with you a little bit today about the state of PT in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. It's part of the provision of public transport across the Eastern Bay. While most of that is focused, of course, on the high urban areas of Tauranga and Rotorua, there is a service that runs out across the Eastern Bay servicing Whakatane and Opotiki and some of the small rural townships there. And we want to acknowledge and express our appreciation for that service, but also perhaps note a few issues with it and opportunities perhaps too that we can look at in the future. So without further ado, I'll just quickly run through this presentation with you if I could. So quickly just want to look at the current state and some issues and opportunities and then some proposed actions. So Bay Bus, the same service provider across the whole Bay of Plenty, services us in the Eastern Bay. And on paper, the coverage seems like it's reaching nearly all of our remote rural communities, by and large, it's a pretty good service. There's a connection daily between Whakatane and Tauranga that extends out to Opotiki as well. And then from Whakatane, there's a number of circuits that service the various rural communities that we have. There's one that goes west out to Matata and back down through Edgecombe. There's another one that runs down to Kararo and back, and another one that runs east out to Opotiki, heading out through Ahopi to Opotiki, and then the return trip comes back down through that southern loop through Waimana. And then there's also an urban circuit, if we can call Whakatane urban. We have the luxury of about 7 circuits of a public transport bus through the Whakatane and Ahopi urban area. There's a few exceptions, communities that aren't serviced by this, and they're circled in red on that map. One's Ratoki. Most of our small communities are around about 600 population in size, 600 or 700, and Ratoki is no different to any of the others, but it doesn't have a service that's provided there. And then also to the south of our district, we've got other communities that aren't serviced, Galatea, Waiho, and down to Murupara. We recognise that Murupara community tend to look towards Rotorua as their service centre, and I think there is a PT service there. However, there are communities between Murupara and Whakatane that look to Whakatane as their service centre, such as Galatea and Waiho, and there's no PT provision there. And that's not a criticism at all, it's just a recognition of the current state. I guess while the service is pretty good, the timetables are not necessarily conducive to easy accessibility for the community to where they want to go and what they want to do. So I'll just quickly run through a few examples. And if we look at that eastern loop from Whakatane, runs, let me see, can I get this thing working? Yeah, Whakatane there, it runs through Ahopi and off to Opotiki, and then it comes back down through the southern communities, Waimana, and back up into Whakatane. So this next few series of maps is going to be similar to this. It's going to show the map, it's going to show the timetable down here. And if we have a look at this, it leaves Whakatane at 7 in the morning, gets to Opotiki around about 9, or is that 9? No, I think it's 8. So what we have is quite a number of people who live in Whakatane and work in Opotiki, and you think, well, that's a pretty good service for that sort of commuter requirement. And it gets them back into Whakatane at the end of the day, about 5:30. And it would seem like that would work, but then the service only runs for 2 days a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. So it's not actually effective for a commuter service. So there's a little bit of a gap there. And then if we look at how's it servicing our smaller communities, example I've given there is from Waimana up into town. Again, it looks good on paper, so it picks up at Waimana at 8:30, gets into the hospital and into town sort of around 9:30, and then it returns to Waimana right at the end of the day, and that's not a bad service. But again, it only runs 2 days a week, and for those who might only have an appointment in town, it's only servicing a limited period of time for them. And then again, also for the people who live out west, Maratā, coming into town, once again, it looks like a reasonably good service in terms of pick up in Maratā at early morning or mid-morning, into town around 10, returns to Maratā in the afternoon, so it provides about 3 hours in town. That's probably okay for hospital visits and most things, but once again, it only runs for 1 day a week, so it has some limitations there. And then our other service running down to Karorau. So Karorau is another centre where people work and live in Whakatane and work in Karorau, and often vice versa as well. So it's a service that picks up in the early morning and delivers into Karorau around 8:30. So probably okay for people who might be commuting, but I'm not too sure whether it really connects with the shift times that people work at there. So I'm not too sure that it's actually used as a commute. And then again, it also only runs 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I don't have any figures on the patronage, but I think if we spoke to the council staff, it's again one of those services where patronage is not as good as it could be, and we're really keen to look for ways that we can work with the regional council to perhaps improve the service, all of these services, to improve patronage. Within the just another quick run through here, Whakatane to Tauranga. So that runs right through into the hospital, and that's excellent. It gets us to the hospital about 11:30, but then you have to leave again around 2:00 to get back into Whakatane. So it's not necessarily a long time to come visiting, to use the bus service to visit family in the hospital. And just lastly, the last slide here is our urban service. So it's a really good service. It runs 7 cycles around the Whakatane-Āhope every day. So it's around 1.5 to 2 hours per cycle. It does a run around a number of our residential centres, but it misses a large number of them as well. So it does operate 6 days a week. So it's got everything that we'd look for, but it's poorly patronised. So something's not quite working there. And we're really keen to look at that with the regional council and to see, try and identify what those reasons are, and to see if there's ways that we can try and provide a more responsive service that meets the locals' requirements, just to better understand why it is poorly patronised and what we can do to try and improve it. So I really want to acknowledge that to date, I guess the Eastern Bay hasn't been particularly involved in the provision of public transport in the Eastern Bay. We've largely left it up to the regional council to provide the service, and we've just been a little bit hands-off in our, not our support, but in our, certainly our governance support. This triennium, our current mayor wanted to make this a real focus, and so she's joined this committee, and the purpose of that is to raise the profile of PT in the Eastern Bay, and and for us as staff to become more involved in working with the regional council about around the issues and opportunities. So we do want to recognise that the regional councils put a lot of effort into the provision of the service that we've got, and it's a good balance between cost and patronage using the traditional delivery models. But it still has some issues, as I've shared. It doesn't service all of the communities. It provides a limited service, 1 to 3 days a week to different communities. It's a little bit of a hit and miss alignment with destination activities, and there's a mixed range of time available for people to spend at the destination. Sometimes they're locked into spending all day at the destination when they might only want to be there for a couple of hours, and other times they might want to spend a few hours at the hospital, but they've got to have a quick visit before they've got to rush out to the bus back into Whakatane again. So what are the opportunities around that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, our council's now actively engaged in PT with respect to the Eastern Bay of Plenty, having our mayor on this committee. We also have strong operational connections with the regional council staff and good relationships there that we're keen to strengthen and to continue growing. We're aware that there's a proposed review of PT in the Eastern Bay this year, and we're really keen and supportive of that and keen to be actively involved in that, and have had early discussions with the regional council around that. We're very interested in exploring different operating models and looking with keen interest at the on-demand trials that are occurring around the country, and also one that's been trialled with Kawerau. So that's about all that we wanted to share with you, just to highlight the Eastern Bay of Plenty to this committee, and to recognise the support that the committee and the regional councils provided in terms of PT to us, and looking forward to the opportunities to continue to work with the regional council and this committee to look for ways to improve the service that is provided. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Taylor. This PT committee, back from the early days when PT started up, has endeavoured to service our outlying communities right through to the east, and it has always been a focus to try to do that. We're really in a strong position right now that with the RITS, the integrated ticketing that has been introduced throughout the region, we now have good patronage data which will help us to make better decisions going forward. So questions, Councillor Nees? Pardon? Absolutely.
Well, just a couple of things. The previous 9 years of my time on council, we were being told by Statistics New Zealand ad nauseum that we were a region in decline and we had to adjust our sales to that extent. And suddenly they've changed their story, and we are not a region in decline, we actually are a region experiencing growth, which is a huge number of challenges, public transport only being one of them, as you will be very familiar with in Tauranga. And so we do have to rethink. We also think that often people traditionally have lived in rural provincial towns, don't have a public transport paradigm in their thinking. They're kind of used to being self-sufficient in that. We know in the previous census that the percentage of New Zealanders with a disability that requires a level of support was something like 24% of the population. As we know, the last census wasn't crash hot in terms of reliability, but I suspect visibly, I would say we have closer to 27% in the Whakatane district in particular. And so that problem and consideration is needing to be rethought. And I'm just going to pick up on what Martin said. I've given a bit of thought myself as to potentially in a provincial area, it may be that we think a little bit differently about the way we do it. And there are some models developing around New Zealand in other centres where they're looking at it a little bit differently. We'd certainly like to do it in ongoing partnership with the regional council, but we sort of would like at some stage, not necessarily now, but to have a think about what that could look like that would be cost effective. Because if our patronage is on buses and it's the size of the bus and the timetables aren't working, is there other ways we could be doing it that would increase patronage? And also we need to do some educating our end to people to let them know that is an opportunity they need to be now considering. So it's we just need the conversation to keep going and maybe us to think a little bit outside the box and look at some other examples.
Councillor Nees and then Natalie.
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank you so much for those words and just absolutely welcome your approach. We will only be successful if we all work together and design something that works well for our shared community. And I think it's what we've been trying to get, perhaps not very successfully by having representation around this table, but we're trying really hard in the Western Bay to have a integrated, coordinated public transport network. It's not easy. We've got our challenges and it's not going to be an inexpensive exercise, but I just love the thought that we will have this model that's growing that can be spread across the region where we work together to jointly deliver a network that meets the needs of our people.
Thank you. Natalie.
Like Councillor Nees, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. I believe myself and some other Waka Kotahi staff are coming down next week just to discuss the motive plan and work through some of that. So that'll be quite cool to bring those ideas forward and start working through that with you guys.
Thank you. Councillor Thurston. And
Councillor Hughes was before me.
Was she?
Yes.
I missed her on that side. Okay, we'll go Councillor Hughes, then Councillor Thurston, Councillor Brunning.
Thank you, and thanks for that presentation. I'm just wondering if on-demand transport is going to be part of the review that you're undertaking next.
Look, we would certainly like that to be on the table. We also recognise that all of our small communities do have a lot of them are marae based, and a lot of them have their own sort of forms of transport to and from places, serviced and run by the marae or by individuals within those communities. And then they have the kura bus services, and a lot of these, there's a little bit of infrastructure there, but it's managed ad hoc and it's all self-funded or Ministry of Transport is not used full-time either. So there might be opportunities and that's what we want to do, and what we've had initial discussions with regional council staff about is exploring what are the opportunities and just seeing if we can find a way through to finding a model that might utilise existing resources and availability and into some form of structure that might sort of better serve the community. So we're open to conversation on any options.
Councillor Thurston.
Martin and her worship, thank you for an incredibly positive presentation. As a previous chair of this committee, Councillor Crosbie and myself spoke with Julianne Genter when she was the Associate Minister of Transport and other members of the ministry, and they were fully supportive of us implementing trials, and we had the full support of the government in terms of trials. Now, you'll see in the agenda today, sure, we roll out trials. One of them was the Mamaku trial in Rotorua under pressure from the community, but it's been an abysmal failure. So at the request of the community, it's going to have the plug pulled on it today, I imagine. But no, if I can, through you, Chairman, just pose to the staff a question with regards to the Eastern Bay of Plenty review, the current status of it, as to when that's going to be implemented.
James?
Yeah, thanks so much, Councillor Thurston. So the Eastern Bay Public Transport Review will be kicking off early in 2021. So Martin and I had an initial conversation when I finally got down to Whakatane last week, and we've agreed that this will be a joint effort between the councils and indeed communities, because if there's one thing that we need to be aware of, we have to design our services against the needs and demands of those communities. Otherwise, people won't use the services that we provide, and we end up, unfortunately, spending money on services that people don't use, and that's in no one's interest. So, Regional Council staff perspective, we're very, very keen to work with our colleagues in the Eastern Bay to get these services into a better state. And we'll also be commencing the Kawerau on-demand trial in 2021. That, I think, will be a really good opportunity to understand what the potential is for on-demand services and how they can actually provide that really a positive and important link for our isolated communities.
I thank the officers for their response, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Brunning.
Just in a similar vein, I welcome the offer of collaboration, and I think that's probably a first around this table when it comes to public transport. And I would just encourage that our staff work with the governors and management in Whakatane to really develop what they believe is necessary, because it comes with a cost, and there are failures as well as successes. And so I'd rather not be too involved, maybe coming back to improve a final plan, but let us work with the people down in that area. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, do you want to respond? Mayor Turner.
One of the projects the government has been funding lately is this Innovating Streets thing, where you do get that chance to experiment, and I think that there may be some ways of we trial some things and see what works and how we could get something set up. Because you're right, the last thing you want is a service that's poorly utilised and costing us too much money. So it may be that we do an experimental thing and together.
And working collaboratively is always the best outcome. Councillor Thompson, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In keeping with your desire for this committee to always operate at a strategic level, I think it's really important that the actual strategic direction that this committee is now giving is recorded appropriately. And if I've heard it correctly, that strategic direction is that we must look to design our services always in collaboration with our communities, and always look at new models and ways of doing things. So I think if that's the strategic direction of this committee, then I think that needs to be recorded in line with what you're wanting us to do, which is to be at that strategic level. Thank you, and welcome, Mayor Salisbury.
Thank you. Do you have a motion in mind that to
Well, I would like to move that in accordance with our role to provide strategic direction for the planning and delivery of public transport, that we design our services always in conjunction and collaboration with our communities, and look particularly at new models of working.
Second.
That'll be recorded. Do we have someone seconding that? Councillor Hughes seconding that. Is there any discussion? Mayor Webber?
I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm concerned with policy being made on the hop. I think we have a bigger coming up at the agenda, which I'll comment on, which is improving our network, and I think that's the appropriate time for us to actually work out, have we actually got a public transport strategy? I agree with the sentiment. I think we have to have it, but I think we're more in the boy running around putting his finger in the dike than strategically.
Mayor
what do
Webber,
we do?
Mayor Webber, have you not read the public transport plan? Yeah, no, and I have a similar concern, but I think where Councillor Thompson's going is in a positive light rather than, yeah. Any further discussion on it? Councillor Neese?
Not a question, but a comment. We've in the past discussed principles of for regional transport and for public transport, and what Councillor Thompson is flagging is really a principle. And I just asked staff to put that away and bring it back when we do the regional public transport plan, get it up in lights.
Absolutely. I'm going to unless you're speaking against it, we're going to move on. You want to speak against it? Oh, you did second it. Yeah, so I will give you a speaking time.
Thank you. I'd just like to agree it's less policy and more our, what did you call them? Principles, thank you. And I think it's really important for us to keep reiterating those throughout so that we can develop that clear direction and keep remembering what our direction is. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put it.
I won't exercise a right of reply, thank you.
Because there's been no one spoken against it, I wasn't going to give it to you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Martin, for your presentation. We will take on board and use it, and hopefully the review will have very positive outcomes for the East. Thank you. We were ahead of time, now we're on time again. Can I call Carol Gordon to promoting Super Gold Card patronage initiatives?
I've got a PowerPoint there. I sent a PowerPoint in. Oh, I don't know. Ask me for it. Last week.
Can I suggest that we just do a switch if you've and put you off until after morning tea? We'll do the chairman's report before morning tea, and that'll give staff a chance to work with you.
It's a pity because I haven't bought it on a USB because I believed it was here, so that's a bit confusing.
Morning tea.
Yes, we'll change the timetable and I'll clarify it.
Yeah, if that's all right, let's do that. Shall we move on to the Chair's report on page 12 of the agenda? And Jess and James, I think, are going to present this. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so we're at page 12 of the Chairperson's report. I will take the report as read and answer any questions, but both James and I will just provide some updates on a few matters contained within the report. I wanted to bring attention to the Low Emission Bus Working Group, which is noted at page 13. So we've had a lot of discussions over the course of this year about decarbonisation of our bus fleet. Labor government is looking at a national strategy for decarbonisation for the entire bus fleet across New Zealand. So a lot of regional councils are now waiting for that direction. But in the meantime, we've joined the AT-led Low Emission Bus Working Group, which has a number of key stakeholders involved, including NZTA, lines companies that will be responsible for the electrical grids that have to support electric vehicles, and then all the bus operators and a number of really experts in the field, and it includes discussions around hydrogen and other possible technologies. So the first meeting of this group with all of the regional councils now involved is in December, and it will really allow us to look at centralising our discussions with Waka Kotahi and joint procurement strategies, particularly because a lot of councils like ours are wanting to look at sourcing these vehicles locally. And so if all the councils are doing that, we really need to take a joint approach. And it will allow us to in turn build internal knowledge within our teams here. So when we are ready to move in this space, that we already are in a position to really hit the go button. The next thing
can I suggest if anybody has any questions on a particular segment that they ask them as we go rather than wait right to the end. So is there any questions on that low emissions? Councillor Winters.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Really interested in this working group going forward. You said the first meeting's held in December. Is that open to councillors to go along too, or is it just staff?
I believe it's just staff, but I can find out and I can come back to you on that.
Where?
I think it's in Auckland, the first one, and I suspect there'll probably be Zoom availabilities as well.
That'd be really useful, Mr. Chairman, if there was Zoom availabilities into that meeting, because this is a big ticket item for us going forward. We've signalled in our, we've got 5 electric buses now. We'd like to do more, but if the Crown's going to lead this strategy, let's get in behind, see what they're going to do, we can add it. Great that the Lines Company are there as well, because we know the infrastructure is going to be a biggie, and if we don't have big access to big cables and big power lines, we're going nowhere. So keen to be part of this, Mr. Chairman, and have an input in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, can I just say that this is where strategy really hits the road. We went from 98 buses, I think, to 135 when we did the blueprint. The infrastructure didn't match it. We've got more buses on the road emitting more emissions at the moment than we had before 2018, and we're getting complaints that there's too many empty buses. So we're not actually helping the decarbonisation short term, so we've got to find a way to make sure that we do, so that and that's why we've got to get the strategy. It's got to be linked up, it's got to be collaborative between the TAs and ourselves so that it works. Moving on.
The Employment Relations Amendment Act, which related to the rest and meal breaks legislation. I just wanted to give an update. You may recall at the previous meeting I advised that we are compliant with the legislation. Most councils are now. So Waka Kotahi has moved to commence its assurance program, and that's looking at effectively the operator's approach towards this legislation, ensuring that it's been applied consistently across the country, ensuring that the costs that councils are being required to pay are reasonable, and that there is no undue passenger disruption or driver impacts. The only thing really to note around this is that it does have the potential to either lower cost or increase costs for our council. So we'll continue to work with Waka Kotahi as part of their assurance program, and Deloitte's is leading that. Over on page, are there any questions on that particular matter?
It was just the question of toilet facilities for drivers. It's important that we make sure that our drivers are supported. How's that going?
Yeah, so when we went through the process of implementing this legislation, we had the tripartite relationships, and is Graham still in the room? Graham was part of these conversations with the operator, and so we sat down and we looked at the locations of the rest and meal breaks to ensure that we chose locations where toilet facilities would be available for our drivers. It was quite a big task, but we think for the most part that we did get there. There may be some tweaks that we need to make, and Graham and I speak regularly about these matters, and we are intending to do a review after 6 months of implementation to look at whether there are any improvements we can make in that respect.
Councillor Hughes.
I just had some feedback from a person who has to take the bus from Greaton through to the Mount, and they have to stop They stop while the bus driver gets off for 15 minutes for a pie and a cup of tea, and then continue on their way to get to. So how does that work with current scheduling? When do we? I mean, obviously that route has the people on the bus have to wait for this. Is that going to get worse, or is that an acceptable thing for a passenger to need to do?
I would have to look at the particular examples of that scenario, but it does sound quite unusual the way that we structured the rosters. It was set up to ensure that those sort of situations wouldn't occur. So I'm unsure why that's occurring, but perhaps we can have a look at that. I'll get staff to look at that.
Said it was the CL, so there you go.
Thank you. Moving on.
Okay, over on page 14, we will talk about some of these highlights for our public transport network throughout the agenda today, but we've had some really positive figures overall, and that's despite having a period at level 2 this last quarter. Effectively, our patronage is tracking up and down as we're moving through the alert levels. So we had a 3.3% increase for our region this quarter, and then we had that period between 30 August, 22 September, where we were at level 2. So it's quite phenomenal that we were able to have an increase during this period. It was in large part due to the free fare period in July, so we had a really significant increase in patronage during that period. Our school bus services continue to be a really big success. We've had our biggest month yet. In August, we had 71,000 trips on our school bus services, which is a 28% increase on the same period last year. So it's continuing to grow in its popularity, which is fantastic to see. The regional integrated ticketing system, just an update on that. We have reached 30,000 registered cards now. And we're just seeing a continued reduction in cash on buses, and I'll take you through some of that data when we get to the performance monitoring report later in the agenda. I'll hand over to James now.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I ask a question?
Sure.
Did I hear you correctly say that free fares were the reason for the significantly enhanced patronage?
That's the assumption we have drawn, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Morning, everyone.
Sorry, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you. Look, just a quick question around the school bus patronage, which you said's increased dramatically. Is that just in Tauranga where we have the free fare trial, or has that increase? Have we had an increase or decrease or similar sort of effect in Rotorua?
So we only have the free school services in Tauranga,
Yes.
and the standalone school services, we only have that in Tauranga. So those statistics relate to Tauranga alone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James.
Okay, jump the gun a little bit there. Morning, everyone. Three items in the report that I would particularly like to draw your attention to. The first of those is the Western Bay of Plenty Public Transport Community Panel. So since the last committee meeting, the terms of reference for the panel have been finalised with the chair. We've identified contacts for various groups that were listed in those terms of reference and have sent out emails requesting colleagues to attend a first meeting of the Public Transport Community Panel at a date to be agreed. We've received a few responses to that email and are chasing up those who haven't responded to understand their appetite for being part of our work. And clearly, given the direction we've had around the need to engage with our communities and understand their desires and needs, it's really important that we have a representative cross-section of colleagues representing that panel, so we get a really good and comprehensive view of what people like about the services and what they want to see improved. I'm gathered that there are going to be suggestions for other people who may want to be involved in the community panel. That's absolutely terrific. So staff are more than happy to receive any further suggestions, and we'll pursue those with a view to getting that meeting set up as soon as possible.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you. With regard to that, I can't recall whether or not we saw the terms of reference of the community panel, but it would help us perhaps to make suggestions if you could circulate the terms of reference.
Sure.
And even subsequently to know who's actually on the panel, because without knowing who's been appointed, we can't suggest any bright thinkers that we know about. So if you could be good enough to share that with us, that would be great.
We'll get that circulated.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, the second item is in relation to the Tauranga City Council Park and Ride and real-time information update. So I'm very grateful to my colleague Brendan Bisley at Tauranga City for providing me with an update. In terms of the Park and Ride, the work that's been undertaken so far has been to look at some potential quick win opportunities to develop park and ride sites on particular areas of land around the city with a view to seeing whether it is feasible and desirable to set up a facility and to enable people to use the services that pass that particular facility. So a study has been undertaken and looked at 16 different sites across the area, and basically concluded that although there were 3 shortlisted sites, one in Papamoa, one in Tauranga South and one in Bay Park, none of the sites really met what you would normally consider to be the critical success factors for a park and ride site. And those particularly are where frequent bus services actually pass the site and get easy access to it. The cost advantage, particularly for people who have to get out of their car and then get onto a bus, that interchange has to be minimised. And also the congestion on that route. So what can the bus do to actually bypass that congestion? So fundamentally, the conclusion to date is that the opportunities for short-term quick win park and ride sites are probably not really there. Now, that isn't to say that park and ride couldn't and shouldn't be part of a longer-term strategy, and both UFTI and the Transport System Plan have identified park and ride as being a medium to longer-term solution. And there are certainly plans to start investigating some of the longer-term park and ride options. One of the key criteria for any park and ride site is it has to be accessible to as wide a number of people as possible and across a dispersed area. And also at the destination end, park and ride sites work particularly well when it's less easy to actually park at the destination. Otherwise, why would you why would you go to a park and ride site, get on a bus, when you can drive and park all the way? So I think the conclusion is that there's still more work to be done on park and ride. It's a good concept, it's a promising opportunity, but it's something that it more likely is in the medium to longer term, once you've actually optimised the bus services that we currently have. The other update was on real-time information. So since 2019, 14 variable passenger information displays have been installed at bus stops.
Speak on the...
Well, yeah, we're just, it's part of the same section though. Just let them finish. Pardon? We'll go back to that.
This is part of the infrastructure. This is real-time information.
Part of the Tauranga City letter that came. Yeah. So we'll have, let them just finish this portion, and then, because I would like Brendan Bisley to have the opportunity to comment if he would like to as well.
Thanks. So very, very briefly, real-time information. So since 2019, there have been 14 variable passenger information displays that have been installed at various bus stops. And if you have seen them at the stops, they actually, in my view, are actually really good, very, very clear and concise in the way they present the information. A further 10 stops have been identified for the installation of those variable passenger information displays in 2021. I do have a list of them here, so if anyone does want to ask whether your stop or area has a plan for one of those real-time information units, then please ask and I will read those out. Our real-time information for me is a key quality metric for good public passenger transport. It gives people confidence that the bus service is actually running and meeting their needs, and they don't have to look at a timetable to actually decipher what's going on. So really appreciative again of Tauranga City Council's efforts to improve the real-time passenger information system. So yeah, happy to take questions.
Yeah, Councillor Nees, Councillor Hughes, Mayor Webber.
Well, first of all, thank you for the report. And my issue is the park and ride planning because no more land is being made and the city is developing all the time. And I accept that this work that's being explained now is about short-term wins, but I was concerned to see that sites that we all think are potentially good long-term sites have been discounted because there is route congestion with bus priority isn't in place. Now, we all know that we are working really hard to try and work with our partners to get those bus priority measures in place. And I'm really frustrated that these sites have been looked at and said, no, because there's congestion. Honestly, it's a chicken and the egg situation. If you don't give people options where they can leave their car and then hop on a bus and get into the city or wherever they want to go, you're not going to ever get rid of the congestion. So I think, I hope the work is being done to look at where are the ideal sites, both short-term and long-term, and keeping our eye out. As soon as we've got bus priority measures in place, right, where is that park and ride going to go? We identified it should be there. How do we make that happen? Because unless we are all integrated and joined up and plan well in advance, we're never, ever going to get the system that's going to work for our people. So very frustrated that these sites have been looked at and said, no, they don't work. We should be saying we absolutely need a park and ride in this location, and this location, and this location, and let's work towards making that a reality.
Would you like to comment, Brendan? And welcome to the committee.
Thank you. So in terms of the TSP project, that is still looking at park and ride. It's one of the key planks of the PT infrastructure that's in there. So we are looking at sites and working out where's the optimum. I think what this report addresses is we are saying there's no short-term park and ride facilities that we think we should proceed with in advance of the TSP, not that there's no park and ride sites.
My issue is in the TSP that the obvious sites like Bay Park and Tauriko are not in the first 10 years. So we've got a real issue. We know that's where the people are going. We know that's where the people are coming from and through, and yet we're not planning for it.
Councillor Hughes.
So I just wondered about bike and ride opportunities in the short term. I read the Cagney report, and that was one of their suggestions. It's quite a cheap alternative possibly to get people congregated into an area through riding their bike there and having a proper kind of cage lockup. Is that something that's been investigated?
Not specifically at the moment, but one of the things I will come to in the next item is what we're looking to do in terms of the regional public transport plan. So what I'm really keen to understand is what opportunities like that there are in the short to medium term to make better use of the existing facilities that we've got. So I'm pretty keen to hear any idea and how we actually try and make that work through our public transport planning activities, particularly over the next 3 years, because I think we all recognise there's a lot more we can do to optimise and make better use of what we've got, and actually look at relatively low cost and short-term measures which can make a real difference to people's lives. So really happy to take suggestions for that and work through those with you.
Mentry, how then would that work, Brendan, through our cycle team possibly in collaboration with them? I'm just wondering how that would work in impracticality of integrating those ideas for regional council?
I think from TCC perspective, it's definitely our cycle planning team that need to work with regional council. But just coming back to the park and ride, those facilities are not all about just vehicles. There will be bike parking facilities in there as well. So it's all modes for the park and ride.
And quite often these days we actually call them transport hubs as opposed to park and ride, so to try and get away from that impression that it's all about driving.
Mayor, have you finished? Mayor Webber?
Calm my blood pressure at the moment. And I wasn't the brightest when I went to school, but I'm getting a little lost on this word quick wins. The 2004 document said park and rides are essential, so we've taken 16 years, which I'm interested in your definition of quick. And picking up on Councillor Nee's point, when I read the initial LTP documents from Tauranga City, funding for park and rides is still 10 years away, which makes it 26 years for a quick win. So I come back to my earlier comment about the public transport plan. There's some fundamental stuff here. Are we going to incentivise moving to public transport? And if we do, who's going to pay? Because if you look at the TSP, the capital costs of putting roads in place and all of these things goes to the billions. And so we're looking down, I think, the telescope the wrong end and saying to Tauranga City, and I raised this in my second meeting when I first joined council in 2010. If you look at what it takes to run buses, and I'm used to running trucks, but their turning circles are the same. You know what roads you'll send a bus round, and it's not Devonport Road, so discount that one straight away. You know, we know and have known since 2004 which roads you can put buses down. We know that the CBD of Tauranga, Mount Maunganui, the hospital, where Western Bay have their staff, where Tauranga City have, hasn't changed since 2010 or even 2004. What the hell is it taking us so damn long? And now we have a great document here which says in the attachment, we're going to postpone it yet again. How many goddamn reports do we need here, Mr. Chair? And I go back to, I am only on this committee on sufferance because I was assured by the chair when I was told mayors had to be here, we were going to make progress. Well, evidence in the last year tells me we've made absolutely none. And I just wonder whether you want to take Tauranga City out of this committee and send it somewhere on its own, because the rest of us are getting on. Rangiuru Business Park, which are about to build an interchange, has a big block of land for a park and ride. It has cycleways to get people into town. Western Bay's already bought its land at Amakara, 4 hectares for a park and ride. We did it 4 years ago. When on earth are we going to do it in Tauranga City? You know, this is just, I think, unacceptable. And we've got to look at ourselves and say, as a committee, are we really here to meet the high-level strategies? Or are we here for maybe a good lunch might turn up? I give up.
Councillor Border.
Point of reply, Mr. Chairman. I won't have voting rights, but if I may speak.
I've given you speaking rights already.
Yeah, thank you. Look, just to assure Councillor Nees, Bay Park is not going anywhere. It's not land we're going to lose. So at the right time, I think a park and ride makes a great deal of sense there. But at the moment, asking people to get out of their cars and get on a bus, it's going to go through all the congestion of construction, which is now delayed a couple of years. This was about quick wins. And we have looked at every bit of land just about that we have within Tauranga City boundaries. And bear in mind that when you're in our boundaries, the gain in time transfer from car to bus to get to where you're going, you know, is minimal because the distances are less. So I was very hopeful that Bay Park, with the idea of bus trains, would have worked very well. And KiwiRail has shut the door on that for safety reasons across the Matapihi Bridge. I can only assure you that from my voice and others around the table at TCC, we are very keen on Park and Ride, and it is in the TSP, and it is going to be looked at seriously and thoroughly where we need to acquire land, but some of that land will have to be in Western Bay boundaries, in their area, because that's where we just are filling up, as you know, from housing shortage and so on. And some of it we could get beforehand, but there are costs involved in that, and there are practicalities. I originally thought the racecourse was a great place for it, till we discovered that the Reserve Act doesn't allow us to put parking there, even temporarily. Likewise, down at Memorial Park, big parking area there was created when we did the pipe under the harbour, and we could have just put people parking there and giving them a shuttle into town, and the Reserve Act said you cannot do it. So I just want to assure the committee, I know it is true, Mayor, I would assure the committee we are working on Park and Ride. We haven't lost the sight that it is very, very important part of a PT network, and we will get there. Thank you. Oh, and perhaps I could ask Brendan to comment on this issue of, how far out of town do you have to be in order to justify you getting onto a bus and leaving your car there? There must be some research that has some indication on that.
Just in response, I'm not sure about that specific, but it's just in response to the TSP study. That isn't a TCC, that is a joint study between Waka Kotahi Regional Council, Western Bay of Plenty District Council and TCC. So the dates and the timelines and the sequence in that is being developed by the joint team. They are not controlled by TCC.
Any further?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Oh, okay.
Well, seeing we're all having a bit of a crack in terms of UFTI and TSP, I'd like to contribute to that discussion. As we all know, our partner councils and Waka Kotahi have expended significant sums of money in terms of the urban form and transport business case and the resultant TSP. And indeed, the Bay of Plenty Region Mode Shift Plan, which we've got on our agenda today, is simply going to reflect the implementation of that, which is at its heart about making public transport, walking and cycling, far more attractive for our people. Now, to me, this presents as a significant challenge, particularly for Tauranga, which is the most private vehicle dependent city, I understand, in New Zealand. And what we are endeavouring to do with all of this wonderful planning and expenditure is to actually try and change the culture of our city. And if anyone has ever been involved in trying to change the culture of organisations, let alone cities, you'll understand the incredible challenge that we all face in front of us. But one of the critical success factors for the implementation of successful cultural change is taking your communities with you on the journey. And if I could just have your indulgence, I want to quote from a delightful article this morning by Rosemary McLeod, who was having a bit of a crack at the Wellington City Council, and she said the following as part of many things. I am still completely mystified at how we apparently voted for bicycle lanes to replace car parks, for apartment buildings to no longer have to provide parking spaces, and for the centre of the city, from the Cenotaph to Courtney Place, to be free of everything but buses, even in the side streets. Now, she is simply reflecting that as an engaged citizen of Wellington, she didn't know how all of this happened in terms of making Wellington move quicker. So if anything at a strategic level we need to get absolutely bang on, it is empowering and engaging our communities to come on this journey with us together. Otherwise, we're going to be in for the biggest fight of our lives, in my humble opinion. And so I'm sorry, sir, but I just wanted to say that communications and engagement with communities, it has to be exemplar, it has to be joined up, and it has to be absolutely, hit the mark in terms of what we're trying to do and changing the culture of this magnificent city of ours. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Councillor Brunning, last one.
I share Councillor Mayor Webber's frustration. We're just talking round and round, and I have in front of me a Bay of Plenty Times article on a Tauranga City Council meeting the other day where they extended the free parking in Tauranga. Now that is totally contrary to what we're trying to do around here. And, you know, if you go up to Cliff Road to have a look at the gardens or what up there, you can't find a car park. If you go down to Memorial Park, you can't find a car park. It's all free parking for workers in Tauranga CBD. And these are the commuters, and that has to be our first target, to reduce the volume of traffic at peak hours. And we're working against each other. So, you know, I just wonder also why I had to come in from Tauranga this morning, because it is largely a waste of time. And then to get a report today to say that we can't find park and ride and we'll just put it off for another day is not acceptable. So I am just about ready to walk.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if Brendan could respond to that, because information's important and facts are important.
So is my comment, and I'm a politician. This is a politician's table.
Yeah, I'm just asking if he can report on that free parking issue, because it is...
You have considered an item in isolation from the total roading network problem we have in Tauranga.
Let's keep it through the chair, please. Brendan, would you like to respond?
So in relation to the CBD parking, it's a trial. It's a post-COVID reaction to the businesses in the CBD questioning. We basically had all-day worker parking on street, and so there was a lack of customer parking. So we've done the trial to try and get that mode shift and that behaviour change that we need. It appears to be having an effect. We have now got the licence recognition vehicle driving around town, and so you have seen vehicles which are all-day parkers move away from actually parking in the CBD. They are now going into the parking buildings, and that has a cost, and that is starting to get people to think about what's their best mode to get in and out of the CBD.
Can I suggest that we break now for morning tea? That'll give you a chance to get your think. So we won't receive this item. We'll come back to it. And have you got something that you urgently want to add right now, Mayor Webber?
But referring to the trial, I hope they'll do another trial where we take the cost per hour for parking anywhere to $100 an hour to see what that does to drive behaviours in Tauranga City. They've done one doing it free.
We're breaking now for morning tea because we're quite late, and we'll continue. This is an important discussion, so we will continue it after morning tea. Let's have 20 minutes instead of half. We don't need half an hour for morning tea. Morning tea's in the back of the room, I believe. So it is now 4 minutes to. Let's come back at 18 minutes past. Now, where did we get up to? Because we haven't finished this report. Is there any further discussion on this report before we receive it? Or did the break cool our nerves?
I was going to quickly run through some of the key items for the Public Transport Committee work programme for 2021, and there are three that I would briefly like to draw your attention to. The first of those is the Regional Public Transport Plan, which the current version dates from 2018, and I've read the document and certainly agree with comments that it needs refreshing and updating. So our intention is to commence that work early in 2021. And RPTPs normally look at a 10-year time frame in terms of the strategy and delivery plan. I would actually like to extend that further to look at the 30 years, because with all the discussions we've had around things like the park and ride and the future of electric buses and all these kinds of longer term issues, it is important to look beyond that initial 10 years and say, what work do we need to do now to start preparing us for success in the future? So that, I think, is a really important point. We want to have that longer-term strategy to give everyone confidence that we are addressing the big issues, particularly climate change and new technology, that are going to change the way we have to plan and provide public transport. So that's the first item. The second item, already been mentioned in terms of Eastern Bay, is the sub-regional public transport network reviews. So Eastern Bay, we will be starting that with colleagues from Whakatane and the communities in early 2021. Rotorua is currently underway, and there is a separate report on Rotorua a bit later, so I think we'll park that for now if that's okay. And then Western Bay network optimisation. So this is starting with a review of services in the Mount Maunganui, Papamoa area, before looking at a programme of activities to integrate the service improvements with the infrastructure delivery and also the spatial planning and network planning. We'll have items as well later on Links Avenue and Wairaki, and that's particularly relevant for that Stage 3 public transport review. And the last item in our work programme I want to draw attention to is really critical. It's travel demand management and behaviour change. So Councillor Thompson, you made a very good point about changing culture, probably the hardest thing to actually do. And travel demand management and behaviour change is about exactly that. Understanding why people make the transport choices that they do and working out how we can use a variety of techniques to change the way people think about their travel behaviour and to give modes other than the private car a go, because quite often you find people perceive issues with walking, cycling and public transport, and the reality is actually quite different. So that work, which we'll undertake in conjunction with Tauranga City and also with our colleagues at Western Bay District, is really crucial for actually getting under the skin of why people are travelling in the way they do and what we can do to change their thinking and behaviour over time. So for me, that's an absolutely critical piece of work, and be very pleased at a future meeting to report back on how we're getting on with that.
Thank you very much for that. Before I call Mayor Weber, can I just comment that culture is a really hard thing to change, and for planning purposes, we did the hard yards in 2018 based on desktop modelling actually, but we put on the extra buses. We've increased the emissions as a result of that without getting the patronage up front. So it's really important that we actually solve that cultural issue of how we do it, and I think that is the hardest strategic thing, as Councillor Thompson said, and yet it's the most fundamental, and this committee can't do it. No council can do it on their own. It actually needs an integrated plan to actually get it done. And so I understand where Tauranga City is coming from with the issues around their CBD, but parking is one of those major issues that the decision's been made in conflict with what we're trying to achieve at a macro level, and there is no easy solution because your downtown ratepayers are hurting, no two ways, and we have to, and it will work through, but we have to find a way to help them, and that's not in conflict with what we're trying to do overall. Mayor Weber.
I just wonder if we are actually working in the right time frame here. We have to sign off a regional land transport plan by June of next year. One of the fundamental things is the linkage between public transport and private transport. We all know the reason people don't travel from the east or from the west into Tauranga is you jump on a bus and you get into an hour-long queue. Why the hell would you do it? So, to me, if you're not going to fix the roads or understand the overarching strategy, and that's where I came back to before where Councillor Thompson was saying, I agree that we need a... But why do this a year after we're going to do the regional land transport plan? They're so integrated, and with all due respect, we have to do long-term plans and 30-year asset management plans, so we're supposed to be doing them now. So So all that information should be available at the territorial authority level because we have to do it. We've been doing it diligently, maybe badly, but we've been doing it diligently because we all tick the box. So we're not aligning our public transport strategies with our land transport strategies. How do you do this? To me, strategically, I'm questioning what I've actually learned in my 60 years in business when I come to local government, and particularly this committee. It's misaligned.
In your area out to the northern, there is a plan to put in bus priority and that, but that's reliant on building the northern. I mean, I was stuck in, I know there was an accident on the road. I was out your way yesterday, and it was horrendous queues, at 9:30 in the morning, and even when I came back at lunchtime, the same issue. So,
yeah, but I agree with you. But if you look at the document in 2004, and I have a copy in my office, it's no different to the one we're talking about now. The only difference changed the dates and the lack of inactivity by some of the partners to actually get on and do stuff. So if they're not going to commit to doing this stuff, why do we waste all the executive time and governance time? Just cross the date out of the last one and put tomorrow, 30th of June, and start again. Because we know, I've seen the paper that's gone to TCC. Now, where it lands, I'm not too sure. But if they have not got park and ride in the first 3 years of their LTP, that's 20 years.
Natalie, have you got anything that you could add to help us with where NZTA are coming from? Because, the northern, the Bayfair end, that's jammed up through work, that's is what it is. But the northern, we got an announcement in November last year that it was starting, and now I believe it's not starting for another year. So that looks like it's been put back as well, because this is all part of the, as you say, if we can't, the main park and rides are actually at those main, getting into the, has NZTA, can you help us at all to get an understanding?
So I'd have to check with our system design colleagues about the dates on that.
Yeah.
But I think Mayor Weber's comment around, the dates between the RLTP and the RPTP, I couldn't imagine there'd be too much of an issue having a 30-year time frame with the RPTP as long as it met the requirements for the RPTPs across the country. And that probably create quite a good alignment with some of the spatial planning work that would happen and get some good synergy. So I feel like there could be some benefit from going down that route, as long as we're able to tick the box from
it's not stopping the short-term work anyway. It's just giving a long-term bigger picture of what for achievement. Any other comment, Councillor Hughes?
Just about the Papamoa down to the Mount assessment. Are we going to be looking? I would like to request that we also kind of look at what on-demand transport integration might look like as part of that review, because if we're going to just look at big yellow buses, that's probably not going to be the future in terms of there'd be some kind of combination in the future. But if we were to look at that now and what that looks like, what that might look like, and what that might mean to our infrastructure, is that a possibility?
Yeah, it is a possibility. So with these public transport network reviews, we have to be very open to all possible options, because until we understand what communities and people need, we cannot rule out on-demand or conventional public transport or use of minibuses or any of these kinds of ideas. Now, fundamentally, what we need to be able to do as part of these reviews is come up with what the community and ourselves believe is the optimum approach for using, the assets and the spending that we're currently providing. and then trying to understand how that currently fits in with our contractual model, which at the moment is for provision of those very large buses. So the issue for me is firstly, can we get the right level of service going to the right areas to serve the right people and making sure they can actually get on the bus, and then we worry about what contractual route we take to actually make that happen. So yeah, no options off the table.
Councillor Thompson.
Final comment, I promise. Let's not forget the inconvenient truth, and that is that we are playing catch-up footy like never before. The gap analysis that was done and presented and agreed to Smart Growth said we hadn't kept pace in terms of urban form planning and transport planning. Hello. So we were in a position of massive playing catch-up footy, and we have acted in good faith and invested huge amounts in the urban form business case and the transport plan now. So we've done a good job there, and there is obvious frustration around the table in terms of the go forward. And I look at this, the Waka Kotahi multimodal, and it says here that Smart Growth partners are to investigate a joint approach to planning, designing and delivering the sub-region's public transport activity, et cetera. Got to be top priority. I've been banging on about this. The way we're doing it at the moment, folks, ain't working. It ain't fit for purpose. So could we please put some priority into how do we in fact get better, fit for purpose, urban placemaking, which is urban form and transport planning, actually in place, because that's what we need to do with top priority. We've fiddled around the edges, but the inconvenient truth that a lot of us seem to be forgetting is that we are playing catch-up footy big time. And that comes with, quite a big cost. But I say the way we're doing it at the moment ain't fit for purpose. For goodness sake, let's get on and make that top priority.
Thank you. I'm going to move that we page 12 that we receive the report. Do we have a seconder?
Second, Chairman.
Seconded by Councillor Thurston. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? No. Do you want your voice recorded? Approved. Thank you. We move on. Carol, are you okay to go? Welcome, Mrs. Gordon. Nice to see you again. And I welcome your report. Page.
Thank you for the opportunity to be part of the agenda today. I feel privileged and I want to make use of the opportunity. So I'm going to be a little bit blunt about a couple of things. As you know, I've been interested in transport for a long time. In fact, it goes way back to some decades ago when I interestingly actioned for and came to the regional council committees at the time, led by Ethel Herbert. And collaboratively, we got the licensing of people over 80 removed from government policy. And that was quite a major thing, because older people were run around by contractors who decided that they could clip the ticket every time they made them come back for another test. So, I've been on this case for a while. But today I want to really, I've brought that slide to your attention, and it does say, even though it's not readable, it says we are all connected. And so I'm taking a theme in the context of public transport. But are we, is the question. And we know in the discussion today, I feel that what I want to talk about is really relevant in terms of honouring what Deb said in the public forum and what Martin brought forward from Whakatane. That in fact there are some people who are not connected, and the disconnect is costly to all of us because we are all connected in one way and another. So social connectedness is a strong aspect of the social space that we're in right now in a COVID environment. It's about well-being. We know the Living Standards Framework emphasises social cohesion and the domains that support the integration of social impact work in all our policy frameworks. We know it's about resilience, and it's a word we use rather too casually because I don't think we know what it means in action. And I don't mean to be negative, I'm just saying let's think about it. Let's think about what we really do that enhances those capacities. And it is about digital intelligence. And I want to come to talk about that a bit more in relation to my COVID research. And so we've talked here in this room quite a bit about digitalising the public transport, and we've celebrated the B card. And I want to use this opportunity to compliment the staff in the way they manage that. I had the loveliest experience linking my gold card to the B card and the warm, fun time we had with lots of people in the room all doing their B cards. It was lovely. Do it again. Promote that you're going to do it again free. Do it again. And so that more people connect because they know a bit more about it now. So it's about regional development, but I want to talk about digital stuff a bit more further on. But it's all about love and world peace. And so we've got this global, horrendous occasion that challenges us to think about what local means as well. So it's about public transport being a key driver of that cohesion. But it's now. I'm sorry about the last speaker saying let's put some things off. I want to stamp my feet and say now, 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 please now. Because it's an opportunity time. We can casually use the words and say, oh yes, COVID is such a big thing. It's awful, but it also provides us with opportunity. So we've got to ask ourselves, how are we going to use that opportunity? And if you listen to the speech from the throne yesterday and the debate speeches in the House later, there was plenty of good, principled stuff. And I want to refer to some of that. Noting the point that if we collectively protect the vulnerable, we will protect all of us. And that's about public transport. Public transport was about transport for those who didn't have any other means. And now we've embraced it as a wonderful green climate change imperative. So let's progress. Public transport, I want to talk about public transport providing community connectivity. Now, I've been through all the UFTI workshops, and I've sat in Smart Growth, and I've been to stakeholder meetings, and I've been through the whole trip. And anybody who's been there in the same meeting as me knows that I've stood up every time and asked where the community transport connectivity fits. No, it's about transit. Oh, what about technology? Oh, yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry, it's missed the bus. Excuse the pun. Because we'll always have congestion on main transit routes if we don't enable people to move around their own communities, to go to their local shops, the local hairdresser and medical centre and all the rest. And we can talk a lot of words about resilience, but that's what it boils down to, people being able to connect with one another. And so today we have the opportunity for connected and autonomous and shared and electric vehicles. The climate, the capacity within that scope is amazing right now, and I've talked about it before. So we need to be thinking, in my view, about transformation across mobility ecosystems, of which there's just not one alternative, car or bus or cycles. Oh no, that's not going to cater for everybody's needs. So let's think bigger and think about accessibility in a much bigger picture. So I've made the point about reset opportunity. We all know that the government's offering out billions of dollars. And are we ready to grab some of them that's more than just a transit system? Are we ready to produce plans that are multimodal, connected mobility options? I don't think so. And the GPS says, the new 2021 GPS says better transport options. What are they? Have we got a list? And Tauranga Urban Strategies stresses livability. So those are the contexts that I'm really making this point. And then we've got all the other future settings such as social equity, which we must all take care of in all of our ways, in all of our policies. And I want to mention the silver economy and its vital place of connecting communities and ageing communities and people into our economy frameworks. Public transport has a huge role to play in ageing in place. We know it is about climate change and that we have digitalisation, excuse the spelling mistake there, and the Internet of Things. But are we integrating them into the current plans? I can't quite see it. So let's leave no one behind and get on with this placemaking emphasis. It's not all about mass transport corridors, Mr. Ufty. So just putting a little bit more context in it, I'm currently undertaking a piece of work interviewing elders about their COVID experience. And I have to say, it's pretty frightening. There are some people who have paddled along and done reasonably well, and there's a lot of people who are quietly dislocated. And I'm going to share some of their words with you in a moment. But I read in the tech futures area, and one of our New Zealanders who does a lot of work in that field is Frances Valentine. And she says the longer the pandemic, the greater the digital shift. And the OECD said last week, the digital change is occurring by the day. Every day of the pandemic, there's another digital growth factor. So it is very significant that we start to embrace the wider transport implications there and be transitioning, as Peter Mersey said in that document that I've kind of waved around before, Public Transport 2045 from the Ministry of Transport. You know, we need to be in the transition now. So COVID responses demand social change and innovation, and we have to build for livable communities. So why haven't we got community transport planning? I don't understand. Oh, sorry. So here's quickly what the elders are saying so far. I haven't finished writing up the report yet, but they've said some amazing things. Like, I was shocked when somebody said we've been terrorised. So talking with that, it was actually a couple, talking with those people and the feeling of being told to be locked up was just anathema to their feeling of freedom and independence. And they were in their mid-80s and they're active people. Some said, of course, I've enjoyed doing things at home and I got on with this and that. But many made comments about I've become reclusive, I'm staying at home more, it's the fear of the unknown, my life is diminished. But the lady who said, for me, it was worse than the Christchurch earthquake. She moved up here to be near her son after the earthquakes. She lives nearby. They're a dutiful, wonderful family who visit her almost every day to check on her. She's 80 years of age and she wants to die. COVID affected her hugely despite that social network of support. So I'm really bringing us to the table because of my theme about community connectedness. So despite the system saying we rang up the old people and we delivered food, oh, well, that was one phone call and one meal. But the disconnect is deep. The disconnect sits in the very soul of the people. And how are we going to unpack that? And I'm really telling you about this because I think public transport has a role to connect these people back into our world again. And that's why I want to talk about the promotion of the Gold Card. So here's the Gold Card patronage, and I thank the staff for giving me the details promptly. So you can see the dip, and you've got one of those graphs in your report. But one of the things that we need to understand is that all of us are navigating COVID. We've not met it before. But for elders living alone, navigating that uncertainty without a roadmap is what is causing the dislocation. They're wondering about the rest of their life and how they're going to manage. I read a lot about what the various leading bodies are saying about COVID recovery, and I thought this quote from the Boston Consulting Group was worthy of sharing. And it doesn't ignore the social impact. And whereas a lot of the rhetoric in our country already is talking about an economic impact, and it's talking about GDP. And we really do risk, and some commentators have commented on it, that we risk losing the well-being's focus. We risk losing the four well-beings. And that's if we're already on the page. So I just want to remind you that the public transport research that I did with you said the buses do not go where we want to go, and we've heard a lot about that, and I want to compliment the all-time access, from 9 o'clock, access to the Super Gold Card for free travel. That was really a leading-edge policy. But the point I want to make is that it's a year and a half down the track, and we haven't had it adequately promoted. Now, staff have given me a number of reasons for that, but I want to move on. I want us to promote it. It's incredibly important that we connect our elders back into our communities and into our society. I went to the movies, to the Rialto Theatre the other night with a friend. There were 3 of us in the theatre. Normally it's full, mostly of grey-haired people. Have any of you been recently? Are there many people there, Gary? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Oh, they do, but they're also frightened to go out into public places, is what they're saying. But it depends on the time of day as well. Of course, there are a number of variables there. So the user survey indicated that 93% of older residents didn't know about the B card. And that means possibly they don't know that there's free travel. And so I want to pose the question of, is the free Gold Card, B card travel still going to be free? Is it on trial? And how can we have a reasonable analysis when we've had COVID and a downturn and other impacts? And I wanted to ask Martin whether the Eastern Bay people know and are using the bus because it's free. So let's moving on. I just want to make that reminder about the value, even though it's outdated, it's still relevant because we've got more older people moved into our district since this work was done, so those figures will be greater. I want to just remind you about the size of the silver economy, and also that while the consumers and the workforce aspects and taxpayers and volunteers was assessed, what wasn't assessed was the family wealth transfer. And I hope to talk to Treasury about building that model further because it's used by the government through MSD to assess what they call the business of ageing at a national level. So, you know, we all know that older people help families in huge ways, pay university fees and buy the shoes and pay for holidays and all sorts of things. So there's a lot of wealth transfer that occurs because people are available to be part of the family. So I want to make the point that accessibility is a big issue, and the survey by Key Research, that's a really important summary point that you can take from that, is that an analysis according to accessibility doesn't give us a terribly good measure or not a terribly good outcome. So if we're really going to transform the view shaft, and I commend the comments that were made at the table earlier, we really have to have it as an accessible service. We really have to work on that shared mobility era, because that's what it's all about. That's what the mode shift plan is about. And dare I suggest that it's not what happened, not just about behaviour change. Here we go. I'll click it on. That it's not just about behaviour change. It's no good thinking that people are going to get out of a car if they can't get into something else. A lot of people aren't going to, well, no, some people will ride a bike, but some people won't. So what are we offering them as a behaviour change opportunity? So I think we've got a lot of thinking to do, and that we need to be looking at that that whole issue in much more depth. I won't linger on that because I think those points, while they're very important, are well understood. So we're moving into this mode shift place, and I'm making the point that we need to replan and plan for community connectivity in our public transport system. It is overlooked in Ufti, and perhaps that wasn't its purpose, and I need to accept that. And it's not really in the TSP either, because it echoes Ufti, despite the Tauranga urban strategy, which is really, really good. And so we do need to be looking at rideshare and park and ride and shuttles and micro-mobility to enable connectivity and all those modes, and planning the space, the placemaking and the street space to accommodate that, which is what all the documents are asking us to do. So it is a transition time, but it's about service choice and change. It's not about behaviour modification, for crying out loud. I hate it. I think it's awful. So let's plan in a new paradigm. Let's take a whole fresh look of what we're really doing in all of those plans. And the point about them all being connected is so very real. We need to say, which plan do we need to fix today and what is the next one? To get the line up so that we can make use of the COVID recovery dollars in our place, in our communities, not just state highways. The speech from the throne said, putting people first, reshape and innovate, increasingly respond to technology, and well-being means more than GDP. Those are just a few of the wonderful statements that were made. And so the GPS 2021 says better transport options. And the TSP talks about growth, but not who the people are, in order for us to drill down to provide the real mobility options. And I think that's a major challenge that we have to tackle in that document. So we need infrastructure that's meaningful for people. And I'm happy to talk about it more. Because we all need to be connected and we should leave no one behind.
Thank you for your presentation. Very thought-provoking and well balanced. We're very fortunate in this city and this sub-region and this region that we actually have a lot of capacity to help our elderly through free transport. My question to you is, what happens when we're so successful at this mode shift that our buses are full and suddenly we need more to cater for the elderly as well? Who's going to pay for them? Are the elderly going to be happy when their rates go up to pay for this service? Because right now that's not an issue. But if we're doing our job well, that will be a future issue. So that's just a provocation back.
I need to have a long discussion with you to answer that.
Love to.
And I'll start by saying I don't use the word elderly because that is meaningless, and I say that respectfully, but it's part of my kaupapa that I don't do that, because I don't talk about people in a 45-year lump. We don't talk about babies to midlife and call them teenagers. And so we need to understand the different needs of different people as they age, and because a lot of people at 75, 65, 75 are still working, doing lots of things, building their own new companies, innovating, doing lots of things. They're not frail and older and needing other kinds of services. So that's why I say we need to have a bigger conversation.
Any questions for Mrs. Gordon? Stump them. Thank you. Carol, thank you very much.
Well, it's a big challenge to say to what extent are we going to let go some of AFD and say we need not just to be planning for the future on these transit routes and all the new cities, but planning for community-connected transport right now to revitalise our economy, to enable people to connect and be happy. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes, one last question.
It just occurs to me that if we're doing a PT review of the Mount Papamoa area, that might be a good place to start to look at how we could integrate some of these kind of ideas. And I'm wondering what the potential might be for that kind of collaborative process to look at it in a more cohesive way.
Very large potential, so I'll be very interested to have further discussions about that.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
We're moving on. Oh, Natalie, did you want... Sorry.
Might just be a little bit. Oh, on one of your slides, you had mentioned that behaviour change has a nasty flavour. I just wondered if you could explain on that, because I feel like, behaviour change is integral to that. I just...
But it's the outcome. It's the outcome from having an opportunity. It's not doing to people, it's offering mobility options so that they can make choices to take up responsible actions. It's turning the coin over. It's not manipulating people. Like, what's the point of cutting out parking places so that people can't go somewhere? The hospital's valued its parking place as real estate because it's thinking that cars are bad, so therefore we shouldn't have a parking place. Well, what's the alternative for people to get to the hospital? So you can't take it away without offering something in a way for people to have a life. It's just madness.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. We're moving on to improving our network. That's Jessica, I think, and James. And you too, okay. Yeah, was it?
Tēnā koutou to the Chair, Mayors, Councillors and Members. The three of us are here today to present the Improving Your Network paper to you on page 20 of your agendas. So we'll hand over to James.
Thank you, Namuta. So this paper has a number of facets to it, and the first of these is around the proposal to terminate the Mamaku Village Connector trial at the conclusion of the contract on the 31st of December. So, given the comments earlier about trial services and understanding how we need to design our investments against the needs of our communities, this trial started in relation to community demands back in October 2019, and originally was operated on a Tuesday, a journey each way to Rotorua and back. Following some discussions with the community, that was changed to a Saturday, and the contract was extended from its original termination point in June 2020 up to December 2020. Now, unfortunately, the figures we have for the patronage are, to put it mildly, pretty disappointing. So things started reasonably well in the October of 2019 when the service attracted 24 people in that month. But since then, the next highest number of people using the service in a month was January 2020 with 12, and since then the patronage levels have gone down. COVID has obviously had an impact on that, but in the last 4 months we've had no patronage at all on that service. Now, unfortunately, even the Residents Association have acknowledged that the trial has been unsuccessful, and therefore, based on the lack of use, it is recommended that the trial is terminated when the current contract finishes at the end of December 2020. Now, I think it's really important that whatever we do next, we understand and learn the lessons of what has happened, because that's going to need to inform our future conversations with communities about the challenges that we have in putting on services of this type. So I think it's really important to recognise that we've got a lot of work and thinking to do to ensure that the next trial that we do undertake, wherever that might be, and obviously Kawerau will be the next one off the rank in terms of the on-demand service, that we really do learn those lessons and ensure that we have all the resources in place to fully market and encourage the usage of that service.
Chairman, happy to move the recommendations on page 20. A degree of sadness, dare I say. But that's the reality. We consulted the community.
Does someone want to second that?
Yep.
Seconded by Mr. Thomas. It's open for discussion, and Mr. Thomas, then Councillor Hughes, and then Mays.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I acknowledge the trial, and it was great to have it. And it is sad that it hasn't happened. I would say that Mamaku is an area that's had a renewed, almost explosion of interest in community over the last few years, and they are still working out how they interact as a community. And I have a suspicion that they asked for this a couple of years too early. In the future, perhaps as their community and their interactions with each other increases, I would hope that it might be something we could look at in the future, and we don't automatically say in 5 years' time, no, we tried it, so we're never trying it again. I think it just came a little bit too early in their development. But I do agree that it's time to end it.
Councillor Hughes, Councillor Nees, Mayor Webber.
Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, if it's not working, it's just and as you said, to learn from the mistakes. You think one of the main things you seem to allude to, one of the things was promoting the service, but was there feedback in terms of where the service goes and how how well it worked for the community as the way it turned out to be implemented rather than what they'd thought originally, or was it just in general that they just decided bus wasn't their thing?
I think we've just got to have a deep dive into all the reasons. Was it the right service for the right time, as Mr. Thomas says, or were there other factors, things we could have done better, perhaps as a council, to market the service? I don't have any answers at the moment. What we have to do is go into the detail, understand what happened, and then transfer any lessons from that to the future. And certainly like to provide reassurance that we won't write off any community. Something hasn't worked, that's the way it is, but we'll learn lessons, and we certainly won't write off anyone in the future with any proposals for services.
So, Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted, and I was really pleased to hear you say that you'll be looking further into why it didn't work, because a question for me was, well, unbeknownst to us, are there other community or marae-based services that are actually meeting that need? So therefore, that may be an on-demand thing and might be more attractive to the service that we were providing. So I think, I do support withdrawing the trial. It's obviously not hitting the mark, but I think when we do a trial, we need to be clear about why it didn't work so that we could plan the next one. So I'm really pleased to hear that you're going to be doing that sort of review.
Mayor Webber. Councillor Thurston.
No, just to say that Rotorua Lakes Council has a very engaged rural community board that was leading this charge, and so in answer to Councillor Nees, I think they would have covered all bases. They're fully engaged with this rather unique though marginalised community. So, but no, the door's not shut. But as Mayor Turner has said, she's keen to trial initiatives, but this is a classic example of pressure from the community and the society to implement this method of transport into Rotorua, and it just didn't work, so we tried.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just picking up on Mr. Thomas's points, could I urge staff, please work closely with the TLA, both Whakatane and Rotorua community development areas within their councils, because I'm very aware that there's a significant body of work going on in terms of community-led development and so forth. And so it's not just a transport matter. This is about transforming communities. And so I just urge you to take that broad spectrum collaboration with those particular entities and their divisions of council. Thank you.
Sure.
So, noted. Yeah, we'd like to get out of our transport box as much as possible.
Yep. Mayor Turner.
Thank you. It just occurred to me looking at the figures there that in October somebody got organised and something happened on that day and a whole lot of them jumped on the bus and trialled using it. I think what's failed is a timetabled approach. It's not to say that there might be other approaches to transport that might work more in the future. I just say keep an open mind to what else might work in the future.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move on to the bus user and non-user surveys.
We've also got just an update on the current trials in terms of the patronage, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
So just some very brief summary of the latest patronage information for the various fares trials that have been taking place. So starting with the Super Gold card free travel. So that's now been extended until the 30th of June 2021 and actually started back in July 2018. And the latest patronage figures we have for August, September and October, the number of Super Gold card holders is hovering around the 32 to 35,000 mark across those 3 months. And that's significantly below the peak figures between October and January last year, where we were looking at around 43, 44,000 users per month. So COVID has had quite a significant impact on the patronage for obvious reasons. And although there has been a recovery, the levels of Super Gold patronage are not yet back up to levels that we saw before COVID hit. And I'm pretty confident that there is certainly an issue that some people in our community have about the confidence of using public transport and being in close proximity to people. It's an issue I think we probably face across the world. So that's the Super Gold card. So any questions on that?
Can you just remind me, when we extended the hours, did Kotahi support that extension?
That's the extension we put in place.
Yeah. So they help fund that. Thank you. No, moving on, doesn't appear to be anything.
Okay, so the next item is around the trial of the Tauranga School free fares, which started at the end of January this year and has now been extended to December 2021. So in February of this year, which is the first full month of the trial, we had just over 61,000 boardings by school children. And again, of course, COVID put paid to that in the months of April to June. And since then, figures have jumped back up considerably. So in August, we had actually over 71,000 boardings. The latest figures for September and October are lower, but that's a reflection of the fact that, of course, school holidays intrude into those months, particularly October. So in September, the latest figures I have are just over 61,000, and then in October, 46,000, but that's 20,000 more than the October in the previous year. So I think we can safely say that the kids are really doing it for us in terms of our usage of buses. It's really great to see. What would be even better is that those children, when they become adults, they keep using the bus because they're the future.
Chairman, comment? Mayor Salisbury and I were privy to a solo mum who we were engaged in speaking with, who said that the introduction of free fares for her children has transformed her and their lives. And she said her children have now gained huge confidence, social confidence, a connectedness which she'd never seen before. For her, the greatest gain was time. She got 2 hours of her day back, and the cost, obviously, for a solo parent was really, really important. So from my point of view, this is an absolute winner from the four well-being's perspective, every which way you look at it. So I compliment all of those who have supported this. Well done.
Councillor Hughes.
I remember 2 years ago, I think it was just over 2 years ago, I brought in a young family and they came and spoke really eloquently to try and get the free buses across the line. They had a solo mum parent. And I just went to visit them a couple of nights ago. they took the bus all through there. Last year it was amazing for them. They took the bus and they have 6 kids at home. Unfortunately, though, since COVID, a lot of those kids now, so they're now between 16 and 21, and I went round to their house and there were 5 small cars parked in their driveway. Those kids are all driving now. They saved. One of them works in McDonald's on the other side of town. One works in KFC. One works in Te Puke. And they're all on low minimum wage jobs, and the public transport system for them meant that it was going to be much cheaper for them now to get a car straight after school because it was just so expensive to get an hour and a half across town on the bus. So I just wanted to say that it's not yet following through, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Mayor Webber.
And following on from Councillor Thompson's comments, I just wonder whether we should be surveying Tauranga Girls College, Tauranga Boys College, the intermediate schools, on what was their impact, because we are looking at some similar issues in our small towns of Te Puke and Katikati, where the feeling is if we can provide free public transport, kids will attend school more. A lot of them are at home because there is no other option. That we might have some attendance, and getting back to the 4 well-beings, this is something that I think I was going to bring it up in the next. Could we survey some of those people to see, did they get higher attendance rates? Because if it's helping kids get to school, then that's got to be a benefit as well.
We do communicate regularly with the schools, and the anecdotal feedback is that it has increased attendance, but we certainly can look at doing a formal survey around those sorts of social factors.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask a question, please?
What's your name?
Thank you. In terms of the non-users, my anecdotal research tells me that a lot of people don't know how to use the bus services. And I wondered to our staff, is it possible to put a video up online, which is widely publicised, which takes you step by step actually how you use the bus service? Because for a lot of people, they don't like admitting it, but to me, that's a real barrier. So I wonder if that could be looked at.
I think you might have just identified our first travel behaviour change initiative, and I'll be particularly happy if I can star in it.
Any further? No? So that's the end of that report. There's nothing. We've received the report as well already, so we move on to the bus user and non-user surveys. Yeah. When you're ready.
Just having you staying this one. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chair. So I take it that you've all had a chance to read the report and the accompanying surveys. What I thought I might do is just provide a little bit of context towards each of those surveys and perhaps some salient points that came out of those surveys, and provide an opportunity for some questions. So the key findings of the bus surveys, we sought insights from 950 respondents, and these were in the Tauranga, Rotorua and rural areas. So 700 in Tauranga, 200 in Rotorua and 50 from our rural services. Some of the points that came through from that were the overall performance rating was 80%. Slightly more than 3/4 of users, so 76%, evaluated the local public transport service in the region very positively, and nearly 9 in 10 are likely to recommend public transport. So this was within the bus user survey. Another key point, I think, and respectively with Carol's presentation, but 94% have or they know about the B card, and that certainly did come through in the 65 plus age group as well. Going through to the suggested improvements that were identified within the bus survey, more bus stops, better bus stop locations, reliability as more bus routes and bus connection services. They were the most frequent suggestions that came through. For the key findings of the non-user survey, we sought insights from 700 respondents there, 450 in Tauranga and 250 in Rotorua. All of these surveys were done via telephone, which certainly with the circumstances of COVID was most appropriate as well. Observations there, 64% of respondents in Tauranga stated that the main benefit of PT is the elimination of parking and vehicle costs. 58% of respondents cited convenience as the main reason for using private transport over public transport. And certainly the perception that private vehicles are faster than PT has increased since 2014. With the non-user survey, the last survey we did was in 2014, and the user survey, the last survey we did was in 2018. Certainly like to open it up for any questions. I'd just like to ask that if you are making reference to either of the documents, please let me know, and the page. And if I can't answer today, if we can't answer today, we'll certainly aim to provide a response.
So I've got Councillor Nees and Hughes and Baldock in that order, and Webber fourth.
Thank you. I'm just looking at page 48 of the agenda, where we have 48% of our users using their gold card, as opposed to 43% that have a smart growth, there's a smart ride car, and 77% using cash. Is that representative across the whole network? Do we have that larger percentage of people using the network that's using a gold card? Or am I taking that out of context?
Sorry, do you mind asking that again?
Paying for, the gold card is free, right? So I'm looking at this, so 48% of our users travelling for free because they have a gold card. And is that representative across the network, or am I reading it out of context? Because we're going to be moving into a fare review very shortly. We see the free public school transport in Tauranga going up. We are seeing, if this is true and relative across the network, we're seeing a large percentage of our users are super gold card users, and I presume it's because it's free. And yet, when you have when there's a question about are you satisfied with the how much you pay for your travel, most people were satisfied, but then if a lot of them are getting it for free, it gives, of course they'd be satisfied. So I just think we need to understand our usage when we're doing our fare review, because if I'm reading this right, it seems like a lot of people are liking to use our service because it's free.
Yeah, I think it is safe to make that assumption from the data. One of the things as well with the reports that we did receive, there was a disproportionate analysis of those over 65. And so what we're going back to key research now and talking to them about is getting a demographic that is more representative of our community, so that it can start to balance out, some of those anomalies.
So we go Hughes.
I guess the other way to do it is just to weight them in a way that then represents, so that your data can represent a little bit more clearly, because I noticed exactly the same thing. A lot of the feedback in this is saying we want more bus stops, we want more buses to come closer to home, but the flip side to that is obviously slower journeys, and a lot of the people that are responding are people that have gold cards. So So all of the information is a little bit skewed if we're getting, if we do have a skewed catchment in terms of our in terms of our results here.
Yeah, and that's precisely why we'd like to go back out to make sure that we do get better representation from some of those other groups within our community. And then we'll come back with a further report addressing that.
Order, Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the feedback is very interesting, very encouraging too. I thought I might add a little more feedback from and a bouquet from the Bus 51 trial we've had in Pice Bar. Because we're doing a citywide speed review right now, Pice Bar Road is one of those. So I visited the retirement villages in Pice Bar just recently in the last week. And of course, the speed on Pice Bar Road is one reason why they're not riding the bus, because they don't feel they can get across the road in time. And so they're very happy about it reducing. But I also asked them about Bus 51. How many of you use the bus? And many hands went up through all those villages. There's 440 and 405 in the last 2 months that have used it, which is great. But one thing they said immediately was more of us would use it. And this comes to the survey about the location or the convenience of the bus stop, because they get to the crossing and they get dropped off beside Pack and Save, and these elderly folk have to walk down a whole set of stairs and then walk all the way across if they go in the movie theatre. And they're just saying, if we could get in the back way, because we know they can't get in the front way. And I've had a really good response from Nick Renton too, from the staff, who's going to look into this. But that's just one really good example of, if you don't take people where they want to go, as conveniently as possible, they just get in their car and drive and stuff. So, but they are really thrilled, and I know they would like me to pass on their thanks to the Regional Council and the PT Committee for having put that service on. Obviously, a small bus would get them in easier, but we probably can't do that just yet. But getting in that back entrance will I think, see the patronage increase, and every one of them is someone that hasn't got in their car and gone there, or couldn't go there anyway without the bus service. So thank you very much on their behalf.
It will be good to see the actual RITS data on that. I don't know if that got circulated to anyone else, but that's just one small area that shows all the bus stops. This was an area, this particular one, where they said there was nobody using the bus, and so why do we need it? And this gives the data of adults on the bus and tagging on, tagging off, and children tagging on, tagging off, and that's the sort of data that is really, as well as surveys, is actually helping us to make good decisions, in my view. Mayor Webber.
Statement, not a question. To me, the non-user survey was the valuable thing, because they all told us what the problems were. That's easy. But I think the other thing that we're finding, and I would really encourage you, a far more in-depth survey of where the people are getting on the bus and where they're getting off the bus. And the reason I say that, and it refers to the gold card usage, there are people in Waihi Beach, Kati, Chipuki, gold card people, who are jumping on the bus to get into Tauranga. And I think we've got to understand the origin destination thing, because when you're looking at this, that means Tauranga City ratepayers have to pay a hell of a lot more. But I think what we need to understand is, if 30% of the public are actually travelling in, then how do we apportion the costs? Because it's not a Tauranga City issue. These people are coming into the picture theatres of Tauranga because there ain't none out in the districts. And so that's driving some behaviours. A lot of the reasons they come into the centre is because the service is not being provided out there. But you can't love the cost on the centre. So I think there's got to be a lot more data done in there. The other thing I'd ask is, could we look at the Omokara ratepayers, because there's 14 buses coming in and out of there every day to schools. So we've got good patronage there, really good patronage. Now, it's outside of your data, but when you look at, I know these people at Wakabaramara drive past the Wakabaramara school to take their kids into Tauranga City, because either mum or dad works in the city. And how can we go to the education department and get some data from those people that lines up with this? Because I think some of the hints in there on 2.2.1 would give us a better steer on how to survey so we get far better data. The users, they're convinced, they're already there. It's the non-users, they are the ones we want to swap across and just dig a little. Matakana Island, people use the barge to get from Matakana Island because it's just a bloody long way to swim. So you know, that's where convenience comes in. The timing of the buses now are to line up with the ferries. So I think there's some stuff we can learn. It comes back to the Mamaku thing. Providing the right service for the community that wants the service and the timings for it. So by all means, spend a lot more money on surveying and digging a lot deeper so we can because I think what we're trying to achieve, data will get us there.
We're going to Mr. Thomas and then Mayor Turner.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Look, survey is really interesting, obviously from Rotorua. I was interested in Rotorua data, and there are some places that it would have been good to see the information broken out between Tauranga and Rotorua. The thing that comes to my mind, though, is that we're getting reasonably positive responses from the survey in Rotorua, but we still have declining patronage. So the survey is missing something. You know, we're not getting to the root of what that problem is. So that's a concern that I have, that we have the survey telling us everything's hunky-dory, but actually we're still losing people. So I don't know in future years if we can go back to the same people who are using it this year and find out if they're still using it next year. You know, because obviously people who were using it last year aren't using it now. So I just have a concern that it's giving us quite a rosy picture of uptake of the B card and satisfaction with the service, but we're still losing patronage.
Mayor Turner, then Councillor Thompson.
I was just picking up on what Councillor Baldock said before. I think he asked the right question and found out that it wasn't when the bus left or how long it took to get there. It was actually didn't quite drop them off at the right pace, and therefore they would opt for a car. So that's a challenge to us because, you know, sometimes we don't mean to, but we just don't ask the right questions and could make some big changes or very small changes actually, and can make a huge difference without having to. So that, you know, that's a really good example of making sure. Sometimes when you're questioning, just saying, "Is there anything else that you want us to know?" can open a door to some information that's been helpful. So yeah, it's a good learning.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you.
Last
I just want to firstly compliment Mayor Webber for his suggestion that actually coming up into our long-term plans, we need to be looking at really robust cost sharing in terms of who's going to pay for all of this. So thank you very much for that. And my question to staff is, so given the need for this origin destination work, and then who's going to pay for the cost, because I think we've assumed the Tauranga ratepayer is, are you going to be able to get that information in time for the LTP final deliberations?
Is that the December final deliberations that you're referring to?
No.
Or next year? Okay. So now that we have the RITS data, we do have the ability to start to draw on tag on and tag off data. So we're still working, because it's such a new system, we're still working through the raw data and working out the best ways to present it. But we do have the ability to do that, so we can work towards that.
Okay, we're going to call this to a close now. So I'll move that we receive the report, bus user and non-user surveys. Seconder? I'll give you for it. Well, let's. Okay.
I was interested to see the feedback on the Transit app, and I did happen to have a conversation with staff about what we're actually doing about that at an event yesterday, and I thought it might be helpful for the committee to hear some of the work that we're doing in the technology space to support better user access and to and how they can actually get the most out of the network. Are staff able to do that?
Yes, I can answer that. So once again, with the RITS data and the RITS system, it does open a whole lot of possibilities in the technology space for us. So we are now looking at what improvements we can make, and we have a particular focus on the transit app because obviously the customer experience is the most important things that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve those positive results. So in mid-December, we will have improvements to location, route and trip information on the transit app because we're going to move towards taking the real-time information directly from the RITS system. The previous system, we have the ability to track the buses, but the difficulty was that our system had to predict what that bus was doing. So it had to know which driver was on that bus and which duty card that driver was performing. And so you'd have a driver performing one trip, but then he might go on to another trip, and Transit App had to guess what that driver was going to do after it completed one trip, which is where a lot of the issues were arising. Now we have the ability for the drivers to input their duties into the RITS system, and then the RITS system knows exactly what that bus is doing for that entire day, which then will feed the Transit App. So the Transit App will be able to better predict where that bus is going to go and how it's tracking. So if it's running late on this trip, it can tell someone over here, your bus is going to be late, because actually we can see it stuck up over here. So we expect that that will make quite a difference to the reliability of the Transit App. We also have in December the Transit App becoming available for the entire region. It's only ever been in Tauranga, but we're moving towards now, because we have RITS on all of the buses, having that availability across the whole region. This new real-time information will also feed the Tauranga digital displays that Brendan had referred to earlier. And we will be setting up on our website a live tracking system by the end of the year, so that people can go onto the website as well if they don't have the app and see where all our buses are and what they're doing. So there are a lot of improvements coming, still more improvements to be made, but we are working on it.
And so you've seconded, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to IFTI. Which is 12:35, so it's Brendan. Eh?
Page, yes, page 128. That's all?
Yep, page 128.
Thanks very much. So this report is entitled Transport and Urban Planning Update, which is intended as a general discussion of some of the hot topics that are currently going on. And the one that is forefront in our mind at the moment is the petition that's been received from residents at Lynx Avenue in Mount Maunganui, and the various issues that are prevalent in that area. Brendan Bisley from Tauranga City and myself would like to give a joint update on this. So my presentation really only looked at the PT side of things, and I think it's really important that we give Brendan and Tauranga City Council an opportunity to have a wider discussion about the options that are being considered to address the issues that residents are talking about. So, Brendan, what's your preference? Would you like to have a go first and I jump in with public transport?
You start.
I'll start, right, okay, fine. Right, so in terms then of the public transport services, essentially there are two issues that we are considering from the regional council perspective. The first of these is the potential to divert the eastbound service from Lynx Avenue. So if I'm able, Jessica, are you able to forward the presentation, or is it here? It's clear. All right, sorry. So that's the situation. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the shared path between between Golf Road and Ascot Road, going eastbound on Lynx Avenue. And this is the particular area of concern to residents. This map just shows for the August period the number of people tagging on and tagging off at the various bus stops in both directions along Links Avenue. So the orange figures are for the westbound tag on and tag off. So green is tag on, boarding the bus, and red is tagging off. And the blue boxes are for the eastbound tag on and tag offs. And what it shows is that there's a peak of people tagging on and tagging off at the Gulf Road end of the Links Avenue, and a lesser number at the other stops as you move down. And it does vary between the stops quite considerably. In terms of what the Regional Council is looking at, so diversion of the eastbound buses, potentially either using Spur Avenue or Concord Avenue, and the question about whether there is any merit in removing the westbound bus lane. So I'll start with the diversion of the buses, which is the one that the Regional Council has done some initial work on. Essentially, what we would look at doing is diverting the eastbound buses along State Highway 2, so avoiding the section of Links Avenue between Gulf and Ascot. One option is to take the buses as far as Spur Avenue and turn left, and then the buses would subsequently turn right into Links Avenue and carry on their normal route. And bear in mind, this is eastbound only. The other alternative is to actually continue the buses down State Highway 2 all the way to Concord and then turn them up so that they go back towards Bay Fair. The challenge we have with the Spur Avenue option is that NZ Bus have gone out and tried to turn a bus into Spur, and you'll see in this photograph there is quite a large traffic island, which means that the bus has to slow down almost to a standstill in order to be able to negotiate that left turn. And the issue with that is that vehicles behind this bus, which have no way of avoiding it because there are some wire rope barriers adjacent to it, there is the obvious risk of drivers following a bus not anticipating that it needs to stop and hitting that bus. So that's an area of concern. In terms of moving further down down State Highway 2 towards Concord Avenue, the issue there is that there are actually limited opportunities to place any bus stops on that section until you get to a point shown in this diagram, which is close to the reserve where the footway actually starts. Where the houses are, and going back down that picture, there is actually no footway or really opportunity to put any bus stops at the moment. And the key challenge we have is that if we do move the bus from Links Avenue, we are moving any bus stops, in all honesty, where people are more likely to want to catch the bus. So there is an issue there about access to those bus stops. In terms of the bus lane itself, it is worth emphasising that the congestion in Links Avenue before the bus lane was put in was certainly a serious issue of concern. So the work that colleagues at Becker undertook as part of this issue concluded that in the morning peak, before the bus lane was put in, the journey times could vary as much as 15 minutes because of the congestion. Now, we have a little bit of GPS data for the CityLink route subsequent to the installation of the bus lane. And this GPS data tracks from Farm Street to Gulf Street, and it's a weekday peak journey time. So in February 2019, the average journey time across the peak hour from those two locations was 6.5 minutes, and it's now reduced to 4.5 minutes in August 2020. So the bus lane is working in terms of reducing both the average journey time across that period, and also, I suspect, some of the services that get particularly badly congested at certain times. But I wouldn't pretend the data is perfect, and we are certainly trying to get more data through the Tauranga Transport Operating Centre to see whether we can actually get some extremes in terms of how many buses are delayed by a longer period of time. And if we can't get that, we might have to do some manual timing surveys. We certainly have anecdotal evidence which suggests that the bus lane is doing a very good job in keeping buses to time, but it would be good to have some more comprehensive data over a longer period of time so we have a greater confidence in the statistical significance of what we're seeing. So in terms of the future, in terms of what we want to do in conjunction with colleagues at the City is undertake some engagement around the whole issue of Links Avenue and what we do. And perhaps at this point it's an opportunity for me to hand over to Brendan to give colleagues a wider picture of what the City are thinking about in terms of transport options and how they're tackling this challenging issue.
Thanks, James. I guess it's important to realise this project is, this is not a criticism of Waka Kotahi at all, but the B2B project is funneling a lot of traffic into the local network. So Links Avenue volumes have doubled effectively in the last 3 years. We're seeing similar volume increases on Ocean Beach Road as well. So one of the big issues we've got is traffic are running out of options. So they're either using Ocean Beach Road, Links Avenue, or staying on State Highway 2. So what we're looking at the moment is, in addition to the PT changes, we're looking at, is there changes we can make to the physical street layout? Some of the options we're looking at are cul-de-sacking Links Avenue, still allowing the buses to come through, but cul-de-sacking the street. That would reduce our volume. It would mean that we wouldn't need the bus lane. Potentially there's an alternative route for children to walk to and from school. So we're looking at all of those, and just what we're proposing to do is Council have set up what's called the Arataki Community Liaison Group. So our plan in February is to take the options to them as a group. They can reach back into the wider community, talk through the options that could be considered and get some community feedback on, you know, how does the community feel about it? Because some of those options are significant. Cul-de-sacking Links Avenue will have repercussions on other streets. So before we sort of rush into it, we're very aware that anything we do in this area now, if we pull one lever, we create differences elsewhere, and we need to be very conscious of those because we don't have options. It's not like we have a lot of duplicate streets where we can move that traffic. So I think Regional Council and ourselves are very keen to work quite closely on this to make sure that we get the optimal solution for the residents.
That it?
Yeah, that's it. So happy to take any questions.
Any
or comments.
questions, Councillor Hughes, Mayor Webber, Nees, that order, any?
I just have a question and it's Waka Kotahi really in terms of Maunganui Road, and I know I've raised this, but there appears to be room for a bus lane when you go from Gulf Road down and on the way back to go into Hewletts Road. Have they explored that possibility, or are we working with them to see whether that is part of an options analysis?
I have had a look at this situation in the direction from Gulf Road to Spur Avenue. So that's the section that comes to the left of the flyover, and then the section where you have the wire rope barrier. So I haven't spoken directly to Waka Kotahi, but my concern is that they won't be very keen, because if you create a bus lane, the traffic would be very, very tight up against the wall of the flyover ramp as it comes down, and also the wire rope barrier. And the road does narrow the nearer you get to Spur Road. So I've had a look on Google Street View, which is not the same as actually going out there, and that's probably the next step. And I'm certainly happy to have the conversation with Waka Kotahi. But I'm a little bit unconvinced that there's enough room without having to take out some footway.
To the bus?
That one.
Yeah, that one there.
Yeah.
With all due respect, the traffic island is the problem for the bus turning. In our local roads in Te Puke, we just chamfered that up so the buses or the heavy trucks could go around, so they didn't actually ruin their tyres by hitting the curb. And it took about, I think, less than 18 hours to fix. Has anybody thought of that? Common sense, I know, but it's...
Well, I'm not a highway engineer, but as far as I'm concerned, it's something we could certainly look at. It's I don't know who owns that, whether that's TCC or Waka Kotahi, but either way, it's certainly something we could look at. It's not insoluble, put it that way.
It might be an opportunity to use Murray Guy's bulldozer again.
Don't go there.
Could you go back another slide where you saw the children on the bikes and on the footpath? So which is the shared pathway there?
So what you can see the kids on there is the shared pathway.
But are bikes invited to ride on that?
Yes,
but they don't.
can.
But they're apparently not.
No, some do, but some stay on street. So one of the options that we are looking at, and we're just power codes underway, we're looking to see what it would cost to underground those poles, and then we could actually widen that footpath even more. So one of the issues you've got at the moment is because of the volume of kids, some of the cyclists choose to go on road rather than sharing the path.
So, because from what I heard, we think that the congestion, the travel time is reduced on that route, even though the traffic has increased because of the B2B. And I noticed that there's this erection of barriers adjacent to the shared path was an option that we didn't hear about. And I'm concerned about a reduction of customer service and making it harder for some of the older people that may live in the Links Ave area having to walk across to Monganui Road or walk further up and down if the bus is taken off this. Because what we're doing is reducing customer service for the sake of safety. And safety, I totally agree, is a high priority. But it seems to me that if that's the shared pathway, as you say, making that wider and providing some sort of signage or way of separating pedestrians from cyclists would be a better solution than taking the buses right away from where the people are trying to get on and off.
Yeah, the barriers was... So when we did the report, we just looked at all possible options. Some of them are probably not necessarily the most practical, but one of the options was that effectively we could put a barrier along the curb line, and that just prevented cyclists potentially falling into the traffic stream. I'm not saying it's a good idea, it was just a potential idea. I think what we're looking to do now is take all of those ideas, refine them down to the ones that we think have the biggest likely improvement for the whole street, because we've got to remember it's children, it's parents, we've also got PT users, etc. So we're just trying to get the balance, and where's the right balance point? At the moment, quite rightly, some in the community are feeling that the balance is too focused on the PT lane. And what we've just got to look at is, have we got the balance right, and is it the right mix for that street?
Can I suggest that we have to trust staff to either know or get the information? We're trying to drill in this committee, drill down too deep. Councillor Baldock. I was trying to move this on because
thank you. Yes,
lunch is getting later and later.
I'll be brief though. James, it does seem like the community would welcome 50 trips and 53 trips less on that, trip down Links Ave if it can be shifted to State Highway 2. Have you had any contact with the petitioners about that as a possible option? They'll see this in the public, report, but I mean, any less buses down Links Ave is probably better, except the few that may get on there.
I think at this stage we're still in that data analysis period before we go back, because there's other options we're looking at, like we're modelling what the impact of a cul-de-sac, etc. would be. So I think we'd like to go back to the community with all of the information around all of the options before we just do like one at a time.
But I've noticed that they're pretty alert over there, and they will have read this report. So when they start asking, might be good to have a way of channeling that through, maybe.
Thank you. Do you want to move on to the next?
Yep. The next item is another petition. This one is Wairaki Avenue in Papamoa East. So the issue here is concern that residents have about the number of buses using the loop, Wairaki Avenue, Emerald Shores Drive in particular. And Regional Council investigation revealed that one of the biggest issues was the fact that many of these buses were actually not in service. So they were proceeding from the depot and driving up not in service to Emerald Shores Drive, sitting there for a considerable period of time and before they actually then start their run. So far more buses were using that route than were actually in service. So working very closely with NZ Bus, the operator, we have changed the starting point for the route to Golden Sands Drive. So that now means that, in theory anyway, the only buses going up Wairaki Avenue and into Emerald Shores Drive should be those actually in service. So for Route 36, that should be 11 trips per day. And for Route 33, that should be 30 trips per day, running every 30 minutes. So hopefully that will, for the initial period of time, take some of the sting out of the issue and give residents some comfort that the levels of buses have been reduced. There is a longer term issue about the future of that loop and that route, and that's something we'll be looking at through the PT review that I mentioned earlier for Papamoa through to Bayfair and Mount Maunganui. So we're certainly open to all discussions about the optimum routing for there in the future and what the levels of service should actually be.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yeah, that does really help that there's something immediately that this community. But I think that also we need to recognise that this highlights these big yellow buses on local roads that are quite empty, and the community is pushing back on that quite a lot because, one, they're having to put up with a lot of noise and a lot of disruption, and they're not seeing the success story. So we're in that place at the moment where there's friction. So I guess that's looking at those alternatives between how do we balance modes, and maybe we look at what kind of range of services might be worthwhile rather than running big yellow buses through our local roads constantly. Thanks.
Thank you. Is that the end of that report?
I do have a couple more items, but I'm quite keen that we don't delay things too much. So it's entirely up to you, Mr. Chairman, about how else you want to proceed on this report.
I'm in the hands of people. This meeting has taken a bit longer than we thought. The Te Papa spatial plan, it's taken as read anyway. Is there any, without them going into detail, are there any questions on that last section? There have been none. I'll ask who would like to move that we receive the.
So moved, Chairman.
So moved, Councillor Thurston. Seconded by Mayor Weber. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Rotorua Public Transport Review. Mr. Metcalf, how are you?
Thank you, Chair, Councillors, Mayors. I understand we are running to a tight time frame again, so I'll just work through this presentation really quickly and leave some questions for the end, if you will. So we're just here today to discuss the public transport review and where we're at with that in terms of progress. So we've been following the NZTA business case approach, and we've reached a stage now we have 4 shortlisted options which have been reviewed in terms of economic performance and performance against the project objectives. So I won't run through the details of the programs. I'll just let you know that there's a range of options here. A do minimum, which is really just improvements to reliability. Option 4 is around introducing a couple of extra routes which will really enhance connectivity, and also looking at some bus priority measures there to improve reliability further. Option 6 is very similar to the balanced investment approach, but includes additional frequency enhancements on all regular services. And option 7 is where we've looked at on demand right across the urban centre of Rotorua. In addition to these particular programs of work, there's some add-ons, things that can be added on to any of the programs. The effectiveness of them varies a little bit between the programs, but not hugely. So kind of a pick and mix approach, if you will. So decarbonisation preparedness is looking at the investment in depot and charging infrastructure to better enable that. There's a recreational bus service to allow people to access the fantastic facilities that Rotorua has to offer, in which a lot of people can't get to simply because they don't have the transport means. Park and ride facilities to assist with travel demand management. A new Whakatane Kauro Rotorua commuter tertiary service, really just to bring that in line with what we're doing across the rest of the region. And around the lake service, which is about providing a reasonable level of access to the numerous communities that are on the lake's edge of Rotorua. So we've gone through and done the assessment on each of the programs. I'm not going to go through here in detail. Essentially, as you scale up the programs, you get better benefits. As simple as that. They cost more, but you get a lot more benefit. If you look to, probably of note in here is KPI 2A, which is around the reduction in CO2. We've split that out, one where we go with a decarbonisation approach and one where we stick with diesel vehicles. So just a point to note there. And this is the costings that have been applied to each of those programs. Probably the 3 lines to look at here are your total additional costs up the top, where we range from the do minimum, which is 15 million. Now this is across a 30-year summary, because that's what we've used for an economic performance review. So 15 million across 30 years, ranging right up to option 4 for on demand, which is 69 million across the 4 years. When we go down a couple of lines, we've got the BCRs there. All of them come up positive. As you invest more, the BCR goes down. That's just showing that we're cherry picking the ones that have the best economic performance early in the early programs, and then as you go down the scale of interventions, these things get a bit more costly and might not deliver exactly the same amount of benefit. Fare box recovery for all of them doesn't look too bad on a regional scale. NZTA previously liked a fare box recovery across the country of around about 50%. That's not really achievable in smaller centres, and so this is kind of in line with what we have at the moment, I think. Additional benefits for park and ride and decarbonisation have been looked at. Again, we've got positive VCRs. In the case of decarbonisation, it's only just. And that's relating to 2 things: the cost of carbon credits, which we've taken a pretty conservative approach to at $25 per tonne. That may range up to $150 per tonne in the next 30 years. We'll wait and see on that. And again, park and ride comes out positive as well. One thing to note when we talk about the benefits that are accruing here, a large chunk of these are for existing users. So most of the benefits, I think it's about 90% when we looked at, accrue to existing and new public transport users, and 10% are sort of the wider social benefits. And also there, just for reference, some costings around the other additional items. So there's a lot of risks and opportunities out there with public transport at the moment. I think we've talked a little bit about the central government funding already today. So there's an opportunity there to start decarbonising with central government money. So taking that national approach may be the right way to go on this. There are some complications because our contract is up for tender in 2023, so it will be starting in 2024. So the timeframes there mean that getting something in place around decarbonisation ahead of that contract, or at least having some surety or a plan around that, is really important so that our contractors have confidence that they'll have depot and charging facilities available. Obviously, the urban development potential unleashed by the Urban Development National Policy Statement is very real. We know we have a very large housing problem in Rotorua currently, and following through that to the availability of good public transport services is really going to enable a lot more development, a lot more high-intensity development, which will help to reduce the cost of houses and also reduce the cost of delivering public transport and other forms of transport over a longer period of time. Talked a little bit already about the timing for implementation. It does get complex with new contracts coming out. So with the current timings, if we go to consultation as currently planned in 2022 as part of the second year of the LTP period, it just means that we will have a contractor who may only have 18 months left on their contract, and that may reduce their willingness to purchase the new vehicles and to make changes. So we just have to manage that very carefully around this. So it may mean that some more significant implementations need to wait longer to get done. So the only other issues we have is potentially around delays in terms of climate change and also network performance. So we know that our network is failing, and there is a lot of pressure coming now from both the NZTA and RLC around making sure we're doing our share within the transport environment to deliver a functional network. We're also starting to see, obviously, a lot more interest from the public in climate change measures, and this is one of those areas where the Council has a very clear mandate to control and implement change. So it's really just about understanding what those risks are and then making sure we manage them correctly. But that's pretty much it from me. I'm happy to take any questions. I know I've blitzed through that, so there may be quite a few.
So we've got Councillor Nees. Anyone else put their hand up at this stage? Councillor Mr. Thomas. Councillor Nees. Mr. Thomas is going to express.
I've just got a question. The on-demand service, is that the whole network being on demand, or is this selected portions of it? Because I think when we had that conversation in Tauranga about Tauranga, we were told that it wouldn't be practical to have the whole network on demand because the heavily used routes need to run the way they currently are.
Yes, so that's very true for the Tauranga case, and generally it can be very true for on-demand as well. So what we're proposing with the program there is a initial trial where there are 3 routes, replacing those with on-demand services, and then if that's successful, rolling that out to the urban centres. The important thing with that program is we do leave in 2 of the crosstown long-distance fixed bus route services, because those are the sort of trips that you can't really replace with on-demand. And if anyone who knows Rotorua will know, it's got a very, very compact heart. So actually, a big heart. It has a huge heart in a very small area, but it means that the on-demand services work really efficiently because they can zip backwards and forwards very quickly between destinations. And so it is a really interesting use case for that. The initial modelling we've had done shows reasonably good results, but that's modelling and it's not guaranteed, so hence a proposed trial in the initial sense before making a bigger decision to go with the whole program.
That's great. And just one other question. I was surprised that we wouldn't be out consulting until Annual Plan 2022. Yeah, I was hoping that we could do it Annual Plan 2021. I mean, why does it take 18 months?
I'm not the chairman. Pretend I'm the chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, look, and I haven't got any questions. I do want to thank Joe for all his work on this, and also staff, both Regional Council and Lakes Council, and Waka Kaitoki. And I guess what I want to express here on behalf of Rotorua Lakes Council is distress that this is being suggested, that it's delayed till 2022, 2023. We feel we're practically ready to go out to consultation now to be ready to go into even the long-term plan decisions at the beginning of next year. We think there is an absolute risk that if we leave it to 2022, 23, as Joe said, implementation may not happen until 2025. That will be 10 years, a decade of failing patronage before we do anything in Rotorua. It's also, Rotorua has been in the same situation as Whakatane, and I felt their pain when they were talking about lots of agencies saying that you're a decreasing area, where we've been expanding and growing for the last 6 or 7 years and continuing, and it's accelerating. We're working really hard on, we've done a spatial plan. We're actually now doing district plan changes to get development into place. We need to be looking at bus services for those areas, public transport for those areas. We have done our modal shift program. We have completed our Sideways project. We're just doing little connections in there now. But public transport is a huge part of that. And we've just got this huge hole in the middle of all our planning while we wait for this public transport review to be finalised and for us to be able to move on, go out for consultation and actually come up with the plan. So I guess I'm begging you all to suggest that this happens, the consultation happens immediately, and we look at doing this for the long-term plan that will go out next year.
Yeah, well said.
Staff response.
Well, look, as far as staff are concerned, there's no problem in scheduling a consultation sooner than the original plan. So we're happy to work with colleagues in Rotorua to progress that and ensure that we do take advantage of any opportunities there are to try and arrest the decline in patronage that I think is concerning us all. So look, we're absolutely open to it and happy to put that in as part of our work.
Got the mood.
Chair, would you accept that as a subsequent item to the recommendation number 2? And I'm happy to move. I'm happy to, because as we all know, there is a view in Rotorua that Tauranga blocks out the sun. So I think this is a small gesture that you can all do on behalf of my marginalised community. Just pull it all in and get it into the LTP.
Manu?
So through the chair, obviously council's given some direction on this in the past, and that direction was in terms of consultation in that following period. So the next key opportunity for your consideration is at the upcoming council meeting on the 17th of December.
All right, so any further discussion on it? You're recognising there's going to be an addition to the recommendation. So we're starting with Hughes and then Mayor Weber and then lunch. Oh, no, not quite, nearly.
I just have a question around staff resourcing for, there's quite a lot that gets put in. Is the staff resourced well enough to pull this off, and what's involved in that?
Yep, it does. Staff resource does keep me awake at night a bit, but look, we're in a situation where we're taking a long-term approach to our staff resourcing. We're bringing extra resources into the team, and we'll be having a day on the 9th of December where we sit down and look at the priorities. So if there are any concerns about resources and the impact that that has on commitments we've made, we will come back to you and ask for any further advice or support. But at the moment, we're in a situation where we've got to be open to progressing work that people want us to progress, and then we can work out what the priorities actually should be and what we can potentially shift forward into the longer term, so that we make sure that we do take advantage of opportunities and address any risks. I'm particularly concerned about Rotorua and the patronage dropping, and obviously the issues of COVID aren't helping that. So I think we do owe it to that community to be open to being more proactive in terms of how we take that consultation forward.
Mayor Weber. Oh, it's already been.
Oh, your worship.
It hadn't been seconded? Okay, right, now.
You want me to give you the wording?
Absolutely, if you were.
I'll do it tomorrow, Chairman.
No.
No, I think the staff can put an appropriate word in there, but I think the wish of the meeting is that we fast track this rather than what is indicated in the presentation. Yep. And can I also just add, Joe, is this been presented to RLC, this report?
No, this hasn't gone to RLC yet.
Can I just see you afterwards, as Councillor Winters and Mr Thomas will have picked up, there's quite a number of typos in there that will set Rotorua off like a pack of firecrackers, I can assure you. So.
Namuta, have you got some wording that we can have?
Through the chair, we're just framing up something currently.
Okay.
So the wording we've come up with so far is a recommendation that the Public Transport Committee consider advancing public consultation on the Rotorua Public Transport Review.
Yep. It's been seconded by Mayor Webber. Are you happy with that? You happy with that, Mover?
Just a quick word, if I may, just given how often our colleagues come from Rotorua to listen to all our problems here in Tauranga, I think it would be wonderful to give support to our honourable members from Rotorua. Thank you.
Is it Christmas time? Okay, moving the motion, one, that it be received, and second, that we support the fast tracking. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Now, the last report, I believe, is the...
Do a 5 minute.
Can we do that? Take it as read and do a very short presentation?
Jess.
Jess, is it?
Yes.
It is. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we can be very quick because we have talked a lot about the data. All this data has fed through in a lot of the reports this morning. So we're at page 167 of the agenda. I won't touch on the Tauranga patronage because I talked about that before. But there are some interesting statistics that have come through during this quarter. We've seen a significant increase in patronage in Te Puke, Pōtaka and Matata. Pōtaka was driven by a 155% increase in Super Gold patronage, and Matata has seen a 49% increase in concession patronage. It's been quite interesting in the post-lockdown world, some of the changes in patronage that we've seen. I'll take you just now to page 177. There was obviously just some talk about it now, but we have seen in this quarter a 37.8% decrease in patronage on the Rotorua network. There are some, I guess, theories around the impact of COVID on Rotorua and the fact that there are the COVID hotels, so that there is more fear around community transmission in that town, which has seen that drop in patronage. But that is assumptions. We can't really know. But if you turn over the page to what page is this? 178. We've also seen a decrease in the Eastern Bay network of 31%. So we're seeing a really positive increase in patronage over here in Tauranga. It's quite the opposite in Whakatane and in Rotorua. On page 179, our tertiary services, which James touched on earlier, have jumped back to pre-COVID levels or close to. There's some statistics there on the bike rack use. Interestingly, in that July free fare month, where we had that significant increase in patronage here in Tauranga, we also had significant increase in the bike rack usage, and it seems to align with some of the studies that are done on free fares that often actually you're attracting people who are already using other modes, so it's the walkers, people on bikes who actually then just start using the buses for free. So that's a lot of the data that Waka Kotahi rely on when they don't support the funding of free fares is on that basis, that you're not actually attracting people from cars, you're often attracting those that are already using other modes. So it is interesting that we did see that peak here. On page 183, there's some data around RITs. I did just want to draw attention to the cash on buses, because we do get a lot of queries around that. But we have seen on 183 in the top left-hand corner, you can see the substantial decrease in use of cash on buses. So the green bars are cash. So we are moving away organically, really, from cash on buses, but at a consortium level, they will look at that removal at some point in the future, but there are still some more features that need to be worked through with the RIT system before we're able to do that. I'll just touch on total mobility briefly at page 184. We have completed the procurement process for the total mobility providers, so we have now increased the number of providers available to our total mobility users, which is really positive because we have had a lot of requests for that recently. And there's nothing significant to note on the financial summary. It's early in the financial year, so we are tracking against budget at the moment. So are there any questions?
Okay, so
Sorry
I have
to rush through that.
Thomas, Brunning, Hughes in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Look, just a question about the bike rack usage. I'd just be interested if you have the details for Rotorua, whether we've got much usage there. I never see any bikes on the front of the buses there, and since we have such a high bike usage in Rotorua, I would have expected it. So I'd just be interested in those details if you could come back at some stage with those. Be handy to know.
We can provide that breakdown.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
I just wanted to make a comment on the bike rack usage, because I used the bus 100% of the time during the free month of July, but sometimes I rode one way and took the bus home and took my bike home. And I guess the thing is, with people that don't have the ability to pay for a car or a bus at all in general, their only alternative sometimes is riding a bike, and they have to ride a bike a real long way, or they have to walk a real long way. So I think we need to just be careful before we assume that those people are making the choice to ride a bus or not. They might just be, thank God I can now ride a bus, because actually I was having to ride a bike in the rain, hail or snow. So I think we just, I just wanted to mention that, because I think that there's a lot of poverty driving people's behaviours, and it's gotten worse since COVID.
All right. So would someone like to move that we receive the report? I'll move it. Seconded by Mr. Thomas. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. I hate long meetings that go past my timing, but it was only one thing and we could never catch up again. But there is lunch at the back of the room. I'd like to thank everybody who's made
public exclusion.
Oh, we haven't finished, have we?
No.
Sorry. Oh dear.
And Mr. Chair, there is an item, consideration of matters not on the agenda. Would you be so kind as to allow me to raise one, because I'm conscious that Mayor Webber looks like he's out of here quick smart.
Is this in confidential or in public?
No, it's a public question.
Well, you were meant to let us know at the start, but I'm sure that it will be worth my waiting for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, much appreciated. The question to us all is, are we, the Regional Council, Tauranga City Council and the Western Bay of Plenty District Council, all going out with the same story in terms of UFTI and TSP on our long-term plans, albeit the programs and the costings might be different? Have we got lined up story?
And who are you suggesting answers that question? Mayor Webber.
There is a meeting.
I forgot. That's in the rush. Sorry, I missed that. I was talking to. Any further comments on that, Namuda?
Just through the chair, from a staff perspective, obviously the organisations are linking up and working on a joint implementation plan together. So it is a work in progress.
Thank you. We'll move. I'll move that we go into public exclusion. Is there a second? Councillor Nees.
Just wait for the public.
We'll wait for them, and we'll turn off the recording.
Public to be excluded.
And there will be those leaving in a couple of minutes. We won't be long at this. There is lunch if you would like it.